what you don't know is always the biggest threat. And when you tie that as a psychological fear to the idea of the physical concept of the dark side, that's when story is strongest, that's when character is strongest, and that I think is where you sell the kind of spiritual personal mastery aspect of what Luke is by this point in his own journey. Because he's not Grandmaster Luke yet. He is flawed. He should be stumbling. He shouldn't be a natural teacher. All the things we praised the concept phase aspect of Academy for, that should be present here. But he should still have that early mastery gravitas. He should have that ability to handle Corran to an extent, particularly in this context, which is his whole thing. His whole thing is about redemption. His whole thing is about coming back from the dark. His whole thing is about seeing the good in people, those who are lost. If he can't sell this point, not just to Corran but to the reader, then I feel like the writer himself hasn't truly understood Luke in the way he thinks he has.
You do need obstacles. Things need to get in the character's way. Like the character shouldn't. That's the whole point. The character shouldn't want to go and train right now, but he has to. Like
Mhm.
we're just asking for a better setup there, like to link those pieces together. It's
Right.
right and correct that it gets in the way. It
Mhm.
shouldn't get in the way of the audience though. Like feeling like this isn't the story we were promised.
Where he kind of looks into the mirror and he sees, Halcyon looking back at him and the kind of shock to his system that represents, the click behind his eyes where he realized, oh, I can't, like you were saying, I can't be all one or the other. I'm going to be me. And the sort of revelation that he has, I adore that. And I think, again, like it's very realistic because, you're not necessarily bound. Legacy is important, but it doesn't have to lock you in.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, and welcome back to Fanalysis Star Wars. I'm Callum, this is Matt.
Hey everybody, welcome.
And this is Evan.
Greetings.
Today, talking about a long-anticipated book again on our back burner for a few years now. I, Jedi, which again, much like its predecessor in the book run with Jedi Academy, we have a varied mix of opinions on. So this is hopefully going to be another interesting discussion. Evan, you were the one who were kind of really championing us covering this a few months ago. Why don't you open up with how you were brought to this book and your kind of initial impressions?
Yeah, no problem. Honestly, I discovered this book in a similar manner to the Jedi Academy trilogy, funnily enough. I just kind of came across it one day at a bookstore and picked it up. But my opinions on it are radically different from that trilogy. I fucking love this book. I do acknowledge that it is flawed, but I'm just going to say point blank, this is a top 10 Star Wars book for me. I'd actually probably rank it at exactly number 10. What I will say, a caveat with that, structurally, I would argue that there are books that I would say are structured better than it, even some of which we've already reviewed. That being said, the reason I absolutely adore this book so much is, honestly, in my opinion, it is one of the best character pieces just in the overall EU, the self-contained nature of it. I would also argue that it's honestly probably my favorite Star Wars book in the sense of it being an entirely first-person perspective. Obviously, many books, that we've covered kind of dip into that, but this one is a pure first-person perspective, and honestly, structurally, it just really, really works. It's really not something that a lot of writers can really pull off, but I think Michael A. Stackpole, really just does a great job of just incorporating those elements. And overall, I just kind of want to say that I love the themes that this book touches on in terms of family, legacy, personal identity. It's kind of, those are sort of principalities that I think we as individuals can all sort of relate to in a lot of ways. And Cornhorn's journey as he's sort of grappling with all of those elements of who he is as an individual, and also whether or not he is directly defined by his Jedi heritage, or is he directly defined by the sort of Horn legacy relating to Corsac and the sort of Corellian legacy, or is he entirely his own person? And the fact that he himself often switches through various identities throughout this book, honestly, to me, just weaves a very, very, very compelling narrative. I love Cornhorn as a character, just in general. I love what they do with him in the NJO era. And this really is, I mean, this is the start of his, journey as a Jedi, although obviously he was a major player in the, um,
X-Wing.
sorry, thank you. I almost said Rogue Squadron, the X-Wing trilogy, also written by Michael Stackpole, which I actually haven't read. I have read some of the comic tie-ins, but obviously, he's a major character in there as well. So those elements really draw into it. So basically what I'm really, really getting at is, for all of this book's flaws, and there are flaws, I think structurally it's a little bit too long. Some of the transitions are a little bit awkward, and some of the characterizations range from really, really good to very, very questionable. All of that I acknowledge, but at the same time, I just think this is a amazing self-contained experience with characters that I absolutely love. And it does Jedi Academy trilogy, but better, in my opinion. So this is basically my long roundabout way of saying I absolutely love this book. Flawed, but I still love it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with pretty much all counts there, which is funny because I have a very different opinion of this book as to you. So we'll get to that in a second. We joked before we got round to recording this one or reading it rather that you guys have been selling it to me quite strongly, particularly in the aftermath of reading the Jedi Academy trilogy. And we've made comments about, wouldn't it be funny if Callum was the one who came in and said, this is terrible. What have you guys been talking about? This is absolute crap, etc. And we're nowhere near that level, thank God. But I will admit, reading it, I was disappointed is the wrong word because I agree with everything you said. I do like this book, and there's a lot to really like about this book, and we'll get to the details on that in a bit when we dive in properly. But I'm glad you ended on the Jedi Academy point because that was the point that really dragged it down for me. It does Jedi Academy, the material there, better than the original trilogy book stories. I definitely agree with that, but everywhere with this book kind of covers that material, it really dragged it down for me. There was a commenter, SFP something, SFP7U I think it was, in our Jedi Search video, who pointed out that this book is particular suffering from the fan fiction effect. The whole there's kind of a quality to certain fan fiction that can be a bit self-inserty, and I felt that the kind of heavy hand of that quite strongly, specifically in the Jedi Academy sections of this book. It really dragged it down for me on that one. But stepping aside from that, that section, which we'll get into aside, I enjoyed this book. I thought that everything you said about it being connected to this idea of concept of family and the kind of principle of self-identity and heritage and self-discovery and all of that kind of stuff. I thought all of that was really strong, particularly the opening. I think that was probably the big issue for me. If it had been ordered around a bit differently, if we hadn't gone with such a strong intro to the character of Corin Horn, even though obviously he has been introduced to the readers before, to new readers who hadn't read any of that material, it was a strong intro to his personality. If we hadn't gone straight from that to let's rewrite the Jedi Academy and have the kind of friction points get to that, be the immediate follow-up, I think I would have found this a lot stronger. But with it being what it is, I was kind of disappointed by the fact that it's such a strong setup, then straight into the whole let's fix this previous book run. That was kind of my first impression of this one. But yeah, in terms of all of like the core principles of the story and what the kind of the writer is trying to get across for Horn as a character as well as the Jedi as a whole, I felt that the overall narrative was enjoyable. I think structurally it's not the strongest. Like you said, that was one of the critiques you mentioned. It is a bit hit and miss there. Which is similar ways to some of the stories we've talked about previously. Not nowhere near Academy bad or anything, but just it's a bit stop-start's the wrong word because it is threaded together. But it feels a bit like these are kind of multiple stories within the set, shared plot rather than a cohesive narrative that you would.
It was kind of reminding me of Shadows of the Empire a little bit, where it's like it would cut from Luke's perspective to Leia's perspective to
without
Shizor's
ever
perspective.
without ever jumping perspective. So it has that sort of shared connective tissue for the fact that you're with the one character, but it feels like this could have been better if it was stretched out or cut down a bit, with one of those choices. But anyway, I enjoyed this. I really didn't enjoy the Jedi Academy parts and the flaws there carried over to a few of the other sections too. But that aside, like you said, probably place this around the kind of Shadows of the Empire territory with a significant dose of more personal heart, but I think that mostly comes down with the fact that you're in the first perspective style. So yeah, that was a much more rambly summary on my views of this one, but we'll get more into the kind of details as we go through.
Don't worry about rambling because I'll confuse things by agreeing and disagreeing in all the wrong places. Like this book is funny to me because my introduction to this was actually like when I was like 18, maybe 19. I think I started doing versus videos when I was 17. And then so like within a year and a half of that, I had bumped into Connor. And he had to explain his name to me. like Jen Sarai or whatever, and he was like, "You've read I Jedi, right?" And he asked it in that way. I was like, "You idiot, haven't you read it?" And I was like, "Oh, sure I have." By which I meant I had skimmed it and hadn't really thought that much about it, and didn't get all the way to the end, which is the only place where that's relevant. You know what I mean? I'm getting to like him explaining his channel name and everything like that. But that was kind of like, okay, I better read this. So I read it at about that age, and I really liked it, and I was kind of surprised that I did because this has never been like my favorite era. I was always more into like the Old Republic or up to like the Clone Wars era stuff as far as like EU goes. But I enjoyed this. I'm going over to the. Okay, here's the thing. The way that
For
you
the
guys
dark
were
side?
talking about this before, yeah, the way that you guys were talking about this before, Evan was like really gung ho, and Callan, can I just say you gave a much more negative impression than what you
I
just
was
said
at
here
that
on
point
camera.
only the first third of the way through, and I was like, "Ooh, if this carries on this way."
Okay,
Okay, that's a
okay. Well,
sign of
I didn't know
deception,
that, but
okay.
you were very much like "Ugh," like this, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go over to the dark side a little bit and agree with Callan on some things because at the time that I was selling it to you, I was at about that point
Mm,
on a reread though, because I was like, I'm really enjoying this because it was like the intro and everything like
mm.
that.
Which is
And the
strong,
further
which
the
is
book
really
gets
strong.
along,
There's so much stuff I want to talk about that I
Mhm.
love about this book, for the
we'll get into
record.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get
Yeah,
into
yeah.
that. But like the way that the book starts out is funny because like I enjoy it less as it goes along. And for me, like the thing that you single out, like the Jedi Academy stuff, that didn't bother me so much. Although I agree with like the self-insert thing, but for me,
Mm.
that's a thing all throughout the entire book. Like that's a
Yeah, yeah,
complaint that I would
it does come up
lodge
throughout
into
the
the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Um, I I'm going to be harsher than you were, which I didn't expect. Talking about the structure, I think that it is very. I think it's messy, like, just in terms of the events that happen.
Mm.
And at the same time, I don't dislike like very much like individual like arcs or scenes within scenes. There are actually a few scenes that I do dislike. We'll talk about them, I guess. But overall, I think that for me, I just don't agree with this medium. I think that this is the wrong medium. If this was like a comic book, like miniseries
Mm.
about this character, and you just put him through every single like one of these stories in a series of issues, where you're breaking up the things, I think I would be perfectly fine with the events as it is. Sticking it all into one book like this, and especially as basically a rewrite of another author's work, which that work I did not like, but I understand it's controversial for that reason as well. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because it is kind of like there are arguments about how cool was Kevin J. Anderson with Michael Stackpole's kind of basically
Sticking his
uh,
oar in.
just retconning, basically guys stepping all over his story. Um, and at the same time, I don't like that original story pretty much at all. Of the three of us,
Mm.
I think I'm definitely the most negative on the Jedi Academy trilogy. So I prefer. Okay, if you want to look at it as that trilogy or this, I would much rather reread this any day than that
Mm.
trilogy. And at the same time, a lot of the things that I don't like about this book are kind of like the fact that it is incorporating so much from stories I don't like Dark Empire, like the Jedi Academy trilogy. And the Jedi Academy trilogy, it was not like just as a brief recap. The first book wasn't so bad, really. There were ideas in there I didn't like, but whatever. It's kind of like the reuse of like another Imperial remnant, just kind of ideas that were getting bland and kind of sour. The fact that it's called Jedi Search, and I felt like Luke was very much sidelined, and my favorite part of that was actually the Han and Kip storyline with Kessel and everything. And it's ironic because I really liked Kip in that book, and after that, it's just like no,
Yeah.
Dark Apprentice and Champions
Yeah.
of the Force.
Mm.
That's where like that series for me, in my opinion, it's not universally terrible. There's some good ideas in there. There are a handful of good scenes, but for me, a lot of it is kind of just frivolous and silly. And I just, for me, like the actual juice of the story kind of like peters out like midway through that third book, and you start telling something else. In effect, that also kind of happens here. It's like, well, I don't know why this book focuses on the events that it does. I don't quite get the reason, although I don't dislike the stuff at the Academy as much as Callan does. I kind of don't get the reason for incorporating it at all, given everything else that is in this book,
Mm.
and also
It wouldn't
the
have
setup.
been there if the
Mhm.
trilogy hadn't come out immediately prior and he wanted to fix parts of it, in my opinion. I think it
But
very much
the
is just
entire
a
character
rewrite
is
of that.
post that, right? Like, I mean, because you have the Jedi Academy trilogy, and I think you get the X-Wing series, and then this, right? So I think. So
In
it
terms
was
of release
kind of like
order?
a in
Um,
terms of release order, I
Would have been
think so.
close either way. Yeah.
Because obviously the Academy trilogy came before this, obviously. But I mean, I think that you also got all the X-wing stuff because that's what made Corran a popular
thing.
character, and then
Mm.
he
Yeah.
had to get turned into a Jedi. You know what I mean? For I don't actually know why he had to be like. Was there a reason for doing that? Like, did someone just say, "Hey, he's a Jedi now, and we have to make that work somehow"? Or is this book the genesis of that? I don't know that much
I'm
about
not
it.
certain. I mean,
Could have done some
maybe
research,
in
I
the
guess.
X-Men
Sorry
books,
about
maybe
that.
maybe
We've not done
him
our
being
due on this
force
one.
sensitive is a thing in those books. It's kind of implied, because they make
Yeah, like
allusions
he's kind of like yeah, he's
because
got
like
like
he
a luck thing or like he's got
yeah.
like a spidey sense that kind of gets him out of
Mm.
trouble. So I guess there's that. But
Mhm.
I mean, I guess you really could have just written it that he wasn't a part of like the initial batch of, apprentices. And at the same time, you're only given the names of a few of them in the trilogy, even though you're told that there's like a dozen. So they left room for something like this to occur.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird, but
Which is
I
which
just
is
don't
it's
quite
interesting.
know.
I can't think of really too many other stories like this when you put the trilogy and this book side by side with the fact that there is open space, like you were saying, and literally having events play out. I was gonna say like a lot of people just say, oh, just in the other room something else is going on, but in this case, literally that is what is
Yeah.
happening. Like
Yeah.
next room over from Jedi Academy, all of this is going on. So it's hard to. I can't think of too many other Star Wars books like this that kind of do that.
Too many other
Yeah.
books in general. This is very much a hallmark of fan fiction, and we've talked about in previous videos, particularly Matt, about
Mhm.
how the larger kind of EU Legends, or originally EU rather, world is basically just official fan fiction. That's what it is, and it's fan fiction with
Right.
that kind of veneer of professionalism put on. The fact you've got editors involved, you've got experienced professional
Mhm.
writers actually putting this stuff out, etc. This was the first novel I'd come across where I felt, okay, this is like, I mean, I've read a lot of fan fiction in my day. This is screaming out some of the negatives of some even good fan fiction has, with it becoming the self-insert reader's
Mhm.
or writer's perspective, kind of warping the tonal sense of the
See,
story.
I agree with that, like, into the point of, like, him being the insert into the story, but I think the reason it doesn't bother me as much is he never it yes, he's there, but I never feel like he takes away agency from the other students in a direct manner from the Academy trilogy. Like, yes, he's there, but it's not like, "Oh, look how great, Kieran is, and look how much the other students suck." It never
No,
really
it
comes
definitely
off as
does enough to
mean
kind of
that
show the
way.
others up as being solid as well. But there's a lot of character perspective and personal philosophy attached to it. That's where it really creaks and comes out in bits and pieces throughout
Can,
the story. Not just the academy, but
can I?
the whole story is affected by that. But we'll get into the details of that as we get to each individual section. But that was where it
Yeah,
kind
can
of
I?
it creaked for me.
Yeah, before we actually go through like the plot and the story proper and everything, can I just say like I the allusion I made to like how I first found this at the time that I read this when I was still like at the end of like my teenage years, the impression I got just from looking around online was that this book was very popular. Like
Hmm.
I didn't really see much in the way of criticism on things like forums or just the online book reviews, things of that kind. And now when you look, it's pretty like either 5 star or 1 star. Like people either love or hate this book,
Hmm.
and a
Mhm.
lot of it comes down to, and some of them are recent reviews or like in the time since like Disney purchased the license reviews. And you know how people put like their profile pics, you can see their photos sometimes. All walks of life, different genders, different ages, people I wouldn't expect to have been reading Legends at the time because they were too young, people who are much older than us, people who are like older than our dads. So I've seen like the gamut, and people kind of love or hate it, and it all kind of rests on Corin as a character.
Hmm.
He
Mhm.
really he goes he a lot of him goes a little of him goes a long way for a lot of people, I
Hmm.
feel. And I think that
Mhm.
when it comes to like we'll talk about the academy specifically in a bit, but I have heard the specific complaint or read it, either in forums or reviews, or I've listened to a few people talk about it in book reviews, like what we're talking about. I haven't listened to a discussion. I've just listened to like people talking at a camera before over it.
Hmm.
But several of them have said in resentful terms that they did kind of resent him being stuck not just into the events of the Academy trilogy, but in their heads being kind of the retroactively made the only point to that story, from the way that this kind of main character sort of syndrome, I guess people
Mm.
might call it. Um, I would agree that that happens, but I also can't feel bitter about it because that was always my issue with the Academy trilogy was I felt like we wasted so much time not at the Academy doing what I want them to do at the Academy. That was my biggest problem with that whole story. I didn't really care for Luke as a teacher or what he was doing, and I also didn't feel like we got enough of it, even though I wasn't enjoying what we were being given. So I have a very weird relationship, obviously,
Mhm.
with that trilogy. So I kind of agree and disagree with like everybody, because I like the book,
Yeah.
well enough, but at the same time, I don't. That some of that might come from the fact that I don't have a strong liking for what came before this, or like
Mm.
immediately before this. I could see that bringing tension to
Yeah.
to the picture.
Yeah,
And
mine
since
grew
it
very
is
a
all
lot, I think.
from, like, Corin's perspective, if you don't initially click with his characterization, I mean, you're literally with him the whole time, so it's not going to change, so that is
Mhm.
also something to
That was the other
take
point
into
I wanted to
account.
flag because you'd mentioned that you were a fan of the character, Evan, and I completely agree. His NJO stuff, which is where I'm most familiar with him, it's exclusively how I'm familiar with him. Really, I love. He's one of my favorite characters from that early run of the NJO. So to see him here, I was like, oh, I'm really excited for this. I came in really wanting to love this, and there's a lot I do love. But the that kind of sort of main character syndrome aspect of it, that fan fiction quality, is the only thing that might have made me a little bit kind of
Mhm.
hesitant on it
No,
as we
and
went through the
it's
story.
yeah,
To
and I
greater and
understand.
lesser extents at different parts.
No, and I don't even disagree with you. I think what really holds it together for me, really, again, it comes down to his interpersonal struggles and the fact
Mm.
that yes, he has that syndrome, but to me anyway, he never came off as like Mary Sue-ish.
Mm.
Like, yeah, he's competent and he knows what he knows, but at the same time, he does struggle, he does learn, and when he's willing to be wrong when things blow up in his face, both figuratively and literally. So to me, it's like it never came off as irritating, even though I do agree it is very much there are definite moments of like, oh, look how badass, Kieran is,
Mm.
but again, it never really took me out of it because I really identified so much with his interpersonal struggles and just the growth that he goes through. Like he felt very much like this is the proto version of that Jedi Master we see during the Long War.
Yeah, I think
Can
there's that.
I?
That's the key. It's how much of your, not necessarily yourself, you see in him, but if you found this book at a certain time of your life, I think it's going to resonate a lot stronger. There's a lot of kind of self discovery as the kind of central through line
Hmm.
for this, and
Yeah.
some of that's handled really well. Some of it's handled a bit awkwardly for me. But I think that's
Oh
kind
yeah.
of if you came at just the right time, this is a book that you could
Hmm.
carry through with you for like
Oh,
decades.
well, well, actually, absolutely, and like this isn't not to get like all woe is me or anything, but like when I did read this, I was in school and there were certain subjects I was kind of struggling to grasp. So reading a story about a Jedi who struggles with a very particular aspect of the Force, I mean, obviously it's not the same thing, but there was like some relation for that for me as like a kid who kind of struggled with specific things academically, growing
Sure.
up. So there is that. And again, I'm not trying to say that in like a self-aggrandizement sort of way, but it is something that kind of did click with me at a particular time. So there
Yeah.
is some bias going into that. I do want to acknowledge that from
and
the
even a little
get-go.
bit older than that as well. A potential father making a decision about whether or not he wants to have a child. With his partner. There's a lot here that is not necessarily
Mhm,
new to Star Wars as a whole, but not the kind of center point of the story. But for the most part, the intro is very strong for that, in my opinion.
mhm,
Yeah. Before we start getting into the nitty gritty of the story, I just want to talk about things on like kind of a broader overview level. I have not confirmed, nor do I know how to confirm the following, but I have seen it bandied about online that he wrote this book in first person, partially because he found it easy to write in that style, Michael Stackpole. But I've also heard that he found it so easy that he apparently threw this together in a month. Um,
Jesus.
so
whoa.
it's I don't know how true that is, but I've seen it said in more than one place. So I don't know where that comes. If it's pure rumor, sorry
Interesting.
for spreading it. If it's true, I have to give him kudos for it. Not, I do consider it messy, but I mean it's a long old book. Like it's
Mm.
a book, and like it's finished. There's a beginning and many middles and an end. And like there's a character here, like with like a strong sense of character. Um, I think that the book is too long for the story that it's telling, but
Hmm.
again a lot of it is when you were talking about things like like Callan just a minute ago, you're talking about ideas like whether or not he wants to start a family, what kind of father he's going to be, what his relationship is with his wife or his partner or his parents or whatever. Those ideas are like pretty much like right there out of the gate, and then take like a long departure from
Mm,
that, and then they come back around at the end. That's okay, but because there's that big gap, he like when it comes up again, like he has to. It's almost like he didn't write the initial setup. He's giving it to you again, and
mm,
I feel like it's got this quality of repetition that I think comes from very much from just like the draft level. But if you're writing something in a month, I think it could have used not a different author, but like a maybe more editing, like a longer editing process,
agreed.
or like a second pass or an additional pass, however many passes it got. Because again, there's not much in here that I think is just the Jedi Academy trilogy, which I am a hater. Sorry, you don't have to feel the same way, but that actively just pissed me off in spots. Nothing in this made
Mm,
me angry, but I
fair point.
was like baffled. Like, why are we still spending time on this, or why is this coming back again in this way, or haven't we already had this idea enough times? That kind of that kept coming to me, especially later in the book. Like
Mm.
that happened less frequently up front. But I just wanted to give him a shout because if it's true that he wrote this in only a month, that explains a lot because it's not a terrible book. It's
Oh
like
no, I mean, if
I
he wrote
think
it in a
actively
month,
a
which
good
I
book.
struggle to believe,
Yeah,
it's a miracle. I mean, this is a miracle
yeah.
of a book if this was written in a month.
I'm shocked
What
that
I've
um,
that's the
heard.
case,
It's what I've
honestly.
heard. Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's
Michael, I
crazy.
think it's worth noting too that like Stackpole, he's gone on record saying that like this is his favorite book that he's ever written for Star Wars.
There's a lot to love. There's a lot to
And
love as we're going to get into when we get to more granular level because we kind of split this up into
and on
different
the
sequences. But
yeah.
yeah, and they kind of again they ebb and flow in quality and suffer or don't suffer from the issues we've raised. To different extents throughout. It's not like I'm going through
So
this constant. Oh, why is this written this way? Or why is this happening? It's just every now and
Mhm.
then it'll come back up to the fore and like we could have done without
on
that.
on the on the point about the first person perspective though, Evan, because you raised that pretty much like right out of the gate with this one. It's the only one that comes to mind. To my mind, are there others that I just am not aware of? I think that there's something called Heir to the Jedi that I never read that was written in first person. I've heard,
Yeah, there
but
was that. That was an example too. I want to say one of the. I know I've read some other ones. I think
okay.
it was one of the like old Republic books too. Was like pure potentially, if I'm
There
remembering
was like a
correctly.
Dawn of the Jedi book that was written weirdly in
Oh,
my head.
that was. I think that was it. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was written, like, in the way that, like, The Hunger Games was, and the only reason I remember that is because I started listening to The Hunger Games, and I couldn't take the narration, so I never finished it, and then I got this book that I'm talking about, like, the ancient Jedi Order, and it was, like, almost the same narrator, and I was like, "No!" I had to stop. But
Eject.
yeah,
You can't just read it.
it's written in a weird tense, but the reason why I bring this up is just because the first person perspective is another, uh, contentious point for people. Some people love it, some people hate it. Some people specifically hate it for Star Wars, which I think is fascinating.
Mm,
I don't get that. It's never been my favorite style, and at the same time, there are books that I absolutely adore that are written in first person. So I don't make that distinction, especially like on a genre or a franchise specific basis. There are people who literally say this is wrong for Star Wars, like many of
mm.
them. So I don't know. Like, I don't know where people fall on that, but I just wanted to say that personally, of the issues that I have, that's not one of them. I don't mind that it's written that way. Um, and also like things like Shatterpoint, that is not first person, but there are many entries from Mace where he's writing in a journal, and
Mm.
there's some of the
Mhm.
strongest bits in that
First.
because
Yeah,
those are
and
basically
also
written
it
from his
does feel
perspective.
first person. There's a lot of Star Wars that kind of toes the line in
Yeah.
tone and style, even though it's not actively written in the first person. You kind of feel that from how closely rooted you are to the characters. Some of our best Star
Mhm.
Wars books are that way.
Shadowhunter is kind of a decent example of that, where
Yeah.
it's kind of like I kind of described it as like 1.5 at times,
Mm.
depending on the shifting. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's never bothered me, and I think it honestly there are certain sequences in particular where I think it really helps with the immersion. And like the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is when he's flying. It's
Mm.
the descriptions of that, him being behind the cockpit as he's in aerial combat. You really do feel like it. And also times where he's describing the force and his sort of relation to it. There the times where he's sort of describing it as like this web of energy, this sort of like matrix sort of interconnecting of like like strands of like energy like bursting from like various different parts of just the universe in general. It really helps kind of sell the feeling of like what he's experiencing in the moment to moment without necessarily taking you out of it, even though some of the transitions can be a little bit abrupt at times. I also really think too the first person perspective really kind of helps with how do certain dialogue sequences, particularly when he's just when Korn is kind of having like back and forths with the various characters. Some of the tonality kind of like really helps when he's describing facial expressions as well as just sort of general body movement. A good way of just kind of teeing up, certain dialogue bits between sequences, I think is really well done.
I think the strength of it just comes from his commitment to it, to the style as an author. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like it's one thing if you just aren't good at writing that style, but I didn't have that problem here, at all. That's
Yeah.
just me,
Yeah, it also lends itself quite nicely to some of the subject matter that's being explored here, like the personal interpretation of the Force. Like you said, Evan, even the simple practical stuff like the piloting, the relationship aspect. It's a strong style choice, I think, for this story. I don't have an issue with the first person at all either. I'm with you on that one, Matt. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say most people's instincts against it comes from the fact that they feel Star Wars is a kind of inherently ensemble in style most of the time, and that limits you a bit in the
Oh,
first person. But I don't agree with the criticism of it being
can
an
I
issue with the franchise for sure.
I wanted to say that as well. That brings me up to another point where, like, if I'm putting on just like my imagination hat and
Mm,
going like, okay, I have oversight over this. So earlier I said that I would have preferred that this had a different format. I stand by that. I don't
mm,
think it's not that he's bad at writing a novel at all. It's just that these are a lot of ideas that don't necessarily all belong in the same book for me, even though it's the same character. So I'd either want it broken up, or I would want it in a more kind of episodic sort of issue format that lends itself to a comic book or a miniseries. But the other thing is, if you didn't want to do that, um, with the title being I Jedi, and with for again for me at least to more strongly incorporate the idea of revisiting the Academy and even redoing it. I think what I would have liked is if you're taking these characters, you just break it up into like a bunch of different segments where
hmm
it's like
I
their
Jedi
version of the
Cornhorn, I
events.
Jedi Stream, I Jedi.
Tion, so yeah,
Exactly,
yeah,
I had the
yeah,
same
Cam
thought.
Solo
Yeah.
Sar, like all the rest of yeah. So I thought do it that way, then you have like a book, and then you have a reason to revisit this character in this time, like, as opposed to just putting the character into the story with the pirates and his wife and everything else. You know what I mean? Because to me, they're very disjointed stories. Most of it is about him coming to Luke and their, parting of the ways before things go back
Hmm.
to something workable by the end. But
Yeah.
anyway,
just
I
just
just wanted to bring that out.
Yeah, jumping on the back of that and tying into the intro as well, because we have bigged up the intro
Yeah.
as one of the stronger parts of the story. That's tied
Mhm.
most powerfully around the relationship he has with his wife Mirax and the choice they're kind of going through at this point, and working out whether or not they want to have a child at this point in their lives, etc. But just because of what you said there, I'll tie it to that. The strongest issue there, and the fact that these kind of plot sequences are happening pretty much in isolation. The weakness above all else to me, and how they don't kind of tie together and feel cohesive in the way they should, is the fact that central tension of I have to save my wife is basically just put on a shelf.
It's ridiculous.
It
Yeah, I
starts
agree. Yeah.
strong. Again, we'll get into the issues of it, how it even begins and is materialized in its own little section. But it starts as
Yeah.
like the header. This is going to be the mission statement of the story. Personal
Yep.
struggle, personal journey, personal dynamics being worked out. Do I want to be a father? How am I going to do that? Etc. La la. Tying into the Jedi. What do you want to do? But Mirax needs saving. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this now for like 2/3 of a book before I get even close
Yep.
to thinking about now. Let's go save
Yep.
Mirax. Like the
No,
urgency,
again,
the
100%.
yeah,
the central
the biggest
core.
flaw of this book is structure
Yeah,
and pacing. That is the
exactly, and that's
biggest
the
flaw
biggest
of this
problem. Like,
book.
the central tension of I need to save my wife, being part of his character journey and personal struggle. It's right there at the front, and then just shelved the rest of the story. That
Yeah.
highlights all of the later. They've got issues in isolation anyway, and how it's structured. But that's the biggest thing that kind of shines a light on why are we covering this? Why are we looking at this? Why do you care about this? Your wife's missing, and you should be worried about that. And it's fine if you don't, taking these asides because you have to take the time to save your wife. That's fine, but he doesn't think about it. We don't see him thinking about it like for any of this story. It comes out for like a few little bits, and that's a problem.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
he thinks about her frequently, but like the mission statement is yes, I agree,
Yeah,
does kind of
in
get
narrative
lost in
terms,
the
I mean, like
weeds
he's not
sometimes.
really sitting there biting his fingers and like stressing and worrying. I have to go faster. I have to learn quicker. I have to do this now. I can't spend time having this conversation with you, worrying about this problem here because I've got to do this. He should be like, Luke, why aren't you teaching me? You said I came here because you said you're going to teach me. Teach me what I need to know. Teach me not like waxing philosophically and berating him for his teaching methods of other students and the whole curriculum. It's like, no,
well,
teach me
hang
now.
on.
Not that I disagree with him. Not that I disagree with him.
He had some valid points with that. Like,
we'll get to that.
Again,
not that I disagree, but the fact that he's taking the time to do it is a narrative problem for me. Like, it should not be what he cares about right now. He can come back to this 6 months from now and solve that problem.
I'm with you on that point. I agree that he should be thinking. I think that should be a stronger flaw for him. Is that not that it's a flaws maybe perhaps the wrong word. I think that it should be an obstacle towards him focusing on his Jedi training in the way that a Jedi should. You know what I mean?
Attachment
because it is very
nothing else.
Well, I mean, it's so natural, and also like Luke's not prohibiting that kind of a thing. It's just a question of like being stressed out and worried and not having a clue what to do about it. That kind of helplessness thing. Just you're going to be fearful and angry and frustrated and wanting to do something in that situation. But also like given how long this book is, I think it's kind of deceptive with the amount of time that goes by, because she's missing for a period of
months. It's almost a year, isn't it? By the end of the story.
No, I think it's like 5 or 6 weeks at the start, and then he trains with Luke, and then I'm jumping much ahead. Sorry about this, but like when he's talking to her father, and his father's all, "How long has she been missing?" And he's like, 10 weeks. So it's like, you were at the academy for like a month. There's all this truncated, like it's actually like a pretty small amount of time in the grand scheme. But at the same time, I agree that what you're talking about should be just on an emotional level. It should be drilled into more scenes.
Also,
yeah.
And just one last bit on that. I do think the weakest writing in this book was when they reveal that they placed her in stasis. It's like, okay, like we need to explain why she hasn't like died of like, malnourishment at this point, and how she's still, functional. So okay, the Empire put her in stasis, so that's why I can't. It's like, okay, like that was the time where I definitely felt like Stackpole probably realized, wait, if this much time has passed, how is she still alive after all? It's like, stasis, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, that was a little that's the point where the writing is like, and I like this book, but I will say that was like the weakest point of writing for me personally.
Well, that's to me as well. But coming at the tail end is sort of like science or magic mumbo jumbo. You can just make an excuse for that. The Gensari have a technique. They put her in carbonite, whatever. That was fine for me. The issue I have, and it was the first kind of problem with the writing I had when I was going through, because I thought, this is a strong start. This is kicking into fifth gear. I'm enjoying this character introduction, this personal drama, this idea of this kind of very focused personal story for him. The Jedi story. The bit where I first kind of fell off the track a bit was, and we've talked about this somewhere recently, the difficulties in writing confusion. Trying to get across a mindset of a character, particularly in first person, where I'm confused, I don't know what's going on, without also confusing and by extension, or as a result, disconnecting your reader, is very challenging. I think he very, very firmly failed in that regard when it came to the situation with Mirax, when he wakes up in the middle of the night and going, I'm forgetting my wife. Also, what am I forgetting my wife? Who's my wife? That whole packaging.
It is a bit weird.
It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't explain itself very quickly, even at all, really, and also seems to have no purpose. I don't know why that needed to be part of the story. It gives you the initial excuse of why he goes to Luke and gets involved with the Jedi like so immediately, but aside from that, I don't get this. I feel like this was a strange choice.
I don't have a lot to add to that, but I will say that wasn't the only time that I had that experience. It comes up again for me with the revelation of his psychic power, but we talk about that later. That was intentional it was confusing by intentionality, but intentionally, but it was still like weird, and I'd read the book before and I was still like, wait, what's going on here? So yeah, I think that was some insulation on this one, because I'd already been through the story. I was like, all right, his wife is missing, right? And he's got to go sort this out. But it is the way that you're introduced to the concept, I think is a bit awkward. I agree.
Right. I like the idea of the psychic sort of like wound in concept is like doesn't really bother me. What I would have preferred they have done, it's like something more along the lines of like his adrenaline and the realization that she's missing is so sort of extreme that he inadvertently locks the memories, in the back of his head with his force powers, because he doesn't know how to control it, and that's the motivation that takes him to Luke rather than it just happening. I feel like if they did something like that, it would have felt a little bit more natural. I think the concept's fine. It's more of an execution sort of thing with me.
Yeah, and tying again the idea of the kind of psychic flashburn is fine, but just tying it within the early narrative, have it be because that's the problem that I need to get over to then be able to unlock my ability to find Mirax. Have that be part of the problem. That's fine, but it just kind of past the initial need to get in touch with Luke, it just fell by the wayside, and almost to the point where he forgot about it. Because later in the story, you feel like it's just, oh yeah, I got my memories back. It mentions it in one point, and oh okay, so. Sure. Moving on. You kind of blink and you miss the situation. I just felt that was a bit weak.
More drafts.
Yeah,
were needed.
exactly.
Yeah,
I very much
agree.
agree. This is a draft issue here.
Yeah.
And again, I want to make a preface. If this was written in a month, he's a mastermind. I have no idea how you would write this level of story in a month.
For real.
Because there's a lot of good stuff. But I want to focus on the good stuff in the early sequence because we're doing a lot of criticism.
Yeah, let's just start straight with the intro with this one.
Because it's strong. It really is strong. It roots you in the character, gives you an idea of who he is, what he's about, his professionalism, his mindset. Yes, obviously the personal relationships is the thing that kicks up the plot, but also just as a character, you're introduced to his view of his wife and why she's as capable as she is, and who the context for the rest of the story are going to be. Different levels of the political system, boost the tank, and everything going on there with the in-law relationship. I liked the framing of this. I was really excited to see what the Wirral, who. We should talk about the narration. I meant to mention the narration a minute ago because the sheer emotion in all of this is just as present as it always is when we criticize this. But
with it being,
I thought it was one of the better ones.
I agree. But the reason it works is because first person and the way this particular story is told, I think it works stronger here. But it just amuses me every time it comes up because he gets involved with some of these scenes. It's way more appropriately placed.
I disagree. I don't think it. I don't think it ever overshadowed anything.
Evan, I'm with you. Like compared to what he was doing with what was it? Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader.
Yeah,
that one took me out. I was like, no, sir. Yeah. No, this was
also his impressions in this are honestly improved too. Like every voice is very, very distinct. And actually, like to your point about the intro, Callan, one thing I just absolutely adore about this book, just all the way through, is that the conversations, for the most part, I will say, the most part, feel just natural. Like the dialogue and the way that like the people Corrin is speaking to just his fellow either his fellow classmates at the academy or just his fellow members of the squadron just it feels real to me. Like obviously they're not talking about real things, but the sort of back and forth, he says something, they say something, someone tries to say something, but then another person kind of interrupts them. The flow just feels very natural, and that's another part that I think the first person really kind of helps go back and forth, because him and Oral talk like they're old friends.
That relationship in particular in the early pages, that was really strong. I love that.
Yeah.
They relate to each other on this level, despite obviously one being human and one not. There's sort of that mutual interest in each other and how they sort of try and relate to each other. It doesn't feel forced, and I love that.
Completely agree. You get that sense of shared history. Like you feel like these are old friends, and that's why it's a shame that he disappears for the rest of the story. It's until he comes back, and then they don't use him when he comes back. And it's instead we get Alfred. Anyway, we'll get there when we get there.
I love his witness too. He's like, so you're not incapable of producing offspring, and he's like, no, I'm very capable. But it's like again, it's like buddies just like chatting, because Oral's just like, yeah, I'll just say whatever. So you're not incapable, and he's just embarrassed, but he's not offended. Again, it just feels very much like two friends just talking. And also in this introduction too, I like the perspective they paint of Coruscant in the post-Thrawn, post-Dark Empire, sort of the emphasis they put onto the rebuilding and how just devastating these campaigns really were. It really helps kind of sell the feel of the impact of these wars and how it affects the everyman, so to speak.
I completely agree. I like the setup of the framing the world pretty much throughout the entire story. To be honest, you get a sense that he really does love Star Wars and then really does kind of care about these environments and adding to the repertoire, as it were. Not just with some of the new setups he's doing here, but expanding on previously used material. I think that he's very good at rooting you in the world, very good at rooting you in the perspective of the character, and that's why I like this early intro more than any other part of the book. I think, off the top of my head, anyway.
I think that the intro is really strong, and I think that it does paint a picture of a different type of story than you ultimately end up getting for vast portions of it. I think it does set up the wrong series of expectations. It does feel like it's a more hard-boiled detective kind of thing, and looking for my wife, and then this Jedi thing gets in the way of it for a while, and like Evan said, I think there are more natural ways we could have implemented the need to seek out Luke when and how and where you do. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I I agree with everything you guys are saying. That's why I'm not adding too much to it.
No, it's okay.
Well,
It's
you
okay.
no,
mentioned
no,
the detective point specifically as
yeah,
well. I would have had that be what this is. Certainly sets up that
yeah,
expectation, and obviously it's framing it that
Mhm.
that's something that he's got from past experience, and tying that in with the Luke aspect. I would have had this be a breadcrumb story. I would have had him following in the footsteps of his wife. Okay, what happened? Where did she go missing? Why did she go missing? Etc. We get the explanation for what happened to her way too early, especially considering he gets
Mhm.
this flash burn effect that should be inhibiting our ability to pick up on that. Instead of going straight to the people who had recruited her and sent her out on this job and getting all of the basic information we need, that should have been something that I think could have been better picked up as we go throughout the story. Especially if that first breadcrumb had been Luke, and the academy aspect is what is what that's what ties us to that first academy sequence. Luke meets him. He's like, I'm sensing this flash burn with you. What's happening here? Just something like that. And you mentioned how we get sidetracked from the detective story by the Jedi set aspect. That is by intention in some ways. Like that's supposed to be part of his character journey. I can already hear people typing that in the comments. He himself feels he's been sidetracked by it, and then chooses to step too far away from it, and has to come to the kind of decision or the conclusion that no, I need to merge these two halves of myself into one, etc. That's part of the arc and the journey. I get that.
sure,
But we
yeah,
don't see that conveyed in the details of the plot as it happens. That's kind of the excuse we're given for why it was there after
well,
the fact.
Yeah.
In better
it's
scenes, frankly.
I just want to clarify that in a narrative, you do need obstacles. Things need to get in the character's way. Like the character
Mm,
shouldn't. That's the whole point. The character shouldn't want to go and train right now, but he
mm,
has to. Like
Mhm.
we're just asking for a better setup there, like to link those pieces together. It's
Right.
right and correct that it gets in the way. It
Mhm.
shouldn't get in the way of the audience though. Like feeling like
mm,
this isn't the story we were promised. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what, and also because again, the actual Jedi Academy bit, I don't feel an imperative to incorporate it into this book in the way that it was. You know what I mean? It does. It's not like a. Oftentimes when we talk about like additions to stories or retcons or whatever, we're trying to say, oh, this one really works for me because A, B, and C. This one is just kind of like this could have been its own independent story, and people
mm.
often do speak of it as a standalone novel, and I don't really think it is. I think I can attest to being a bit baffled by not having read the entirety of the previous trilogy before going into this the first time. I knew in broad strokes because I'd been through things like the Essential Guide to the Force or the Essential Chronology that kind of said what the events of each
Mhm.
book were, but I still didn't know firsthand quite what they were talking
Yeah.
about all the time.
And
But
the
anyway,
X-Wing trilogy on top of that too,
Mm.
yeah,
probably,
that
I'm sure
too. Yeah,
fills in
yeah,
quite a bit, yeah. But
yeah.
one thing I will say though too, that the themes of sort of family and heritage, I love the hologram sequence with his father, Valen,
Mm.
when he sort of reveals the history of like the Corellian sort of Jedi legacy. First of all, I just love the concept of
Mm.
the Corellian Jedi sort of dynasty. I mean, because like Corellia is like it's always been a planet like with a lot of really rich history in Star Wars, and sort of tying that. I love the fact that Luke is like, you won't only just be bringing yourself, you'll be bringing back the Corellian Jedi, heritage to this academy, and we need that. Like little things like that, and when he opens the hologram and he gets the whole like revelation, the emotionality to it all, but also just the history. It's fantastic. It's an excellent example of introducing large amounts of world building while also not disconnecting from the emotionality of the core narrative, integral to these characters, because like the story of Nija Halcyon is obviously something that would later get kind of, I guess you could say, retooled for the Jedi Trial novel, obviously, starring Anakin and Nija, and that
Right.
sort of,
Yeah, because whenever you're dealing with the Clone Wars in this Bantam era of
yeah.
publishing, you got to kind of rework what the idea was of whatever they said the Clone Wars were. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Also, I mean, it is like Valen's like, there's no remains of your step grandfather. As you know, all Jedi masters disappear upon their
right.
death. It's like, yeah, they
Yeah,
all do that, right? Because we
yep.
know they all do that. It's like, okay, like again, like little minor things I could disconnect, but at the same time, I really love that sequence in the sense of, like I said, it's a great example of the keeping the core emotionality, and I love the fact that he's accepting these truths while at the same time still honoring, what his. I mean, let's just say it what it is. Like his step grandfather, like what he did taking, his best friend's, family under his wing and like hiding them from the Empire and all that. I mean, it was a lot, and it's a lot to admire. And Valen's own sort of recognition of that, along with Corrin's, is just I think it's just really, really artistically done. Is basically kind of what I'm getting at with that long
Mhm.
preamble.
Hmm. Just in addition, you can guess the exact day I got to that scene in the book by going through this. I was like, oh great. It was Coco a week after my nan all over again. But yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree
But
though. The artistic quality of that scene is brilliant. But all the whole thread of the grandfather and the heritage connection, I really enjoyed through this. I felt myself questioning, could this have been tied better to the central tension of Mirax? Could we have had some of her perspective kind of put at the head of this to kind of lead him down that route a bit? But aside from that, that was my favorite aside from the core kind of purpose of the story. Really enjoyed it.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think it all earns the intro is fairly extensive, you know what I mean? But I think it earns like that slow burn effect, you know what I
Mm.
mean? It because it packs a lot in there. So I just wanted to like
Mhm.
whatever complaints that come from this when we talk about structure, it's funny because they're not apparent at all when you're first going through the opening segment. It's really
Mm.
good, you know.
Really good.
It just kind of it doesn't like disintegrate. It just doesn't feel perfectly well integrated. You know, it's very strange.
It is that as well. I said before the biggest problem for me was the fact that it got a bit fan fiction-y around the Jedi Academy era.
Mm,
But I think the big part as well is it had got me so excited. All of your hype for the story, both of you, plus that absolutely fantastic intro. I was really excited to get going through this, and then it just immediately just blasts you with the Jedi Academy stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm also been slightly derailed by the expectations of the story, and also we're getting fan fiction vibes here. And again, I've read a lot of fan fiction in my life. I'm not against it on principle, but it just there's that quality to it sometimes that can not be appreciated. Yeah, it just I was like, oh. But once I got through that, okay, this is back to being a pretty solid book
Oh,
again. For me.
are we ready to transition into that part of the plot, the
Yes,
actual
yeah, let's
academy?
do it.
Okay, so
Mhm.
He's criticizing Luke a lot here, and I know we did that, and we agree with basically everything he's saying.
okay,
But the way
okay,
it's
hang
done,
on,
could you not
hang
just
on.
write Luke better? Could you not fix
Well,
it
Yeah,
that way?
I mean,
okay, like if you're gonna do that, um, it is this problem of like incorporating the trilogy as it was. I mean,
Mm,
right. I was
I
about to
don't
say
like
you're
it.
kind of starting with a premise there that's a little tough to sort of
It's like
chew.
that whole thing. I don't know what happened with that, and I don't know it's been a while since we talked about those, and those aren't uploaded at the time that we're recording these, or not all of them are. The first one's out, but like Luke, um, I don't understand why he was written the way that he was by Kevin J. Anderson. So that's number one. I don't know if he just didn't know how to write the character, like if he didn't know how to approach him, rather, or if he crafted it completely 100% intentionally in the way that he did. Because if he did the latter, then that's the most baffling to me. And he deserves this comeuppance. And if not, then it does kind of feel like, okay, here are things that we know people thought of reading the book. Let's just stuff them into Corin's dialogue and have them
mm,
shout it
Right.
at Luke. And that I think is closer to like what the actual definition of like a Mary Sue or Gary Stu is. Like people use that as like he's just good at everything, and
yeah,
like
catch-all.
everything's too easy. But it is that kind of self insert. I'm just using the character to like put my views and my thoughts about everything into the scene, and often win out and just be borne out as the correct one and the right one and the superior one all the time. Um, I I didn't actually have a problem with very much he said to Luke, but it is a little bit like I don't really like there's a kind of soapbox quality to it. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel
exactly.
when you were talking when you were talking earlier, Evan, about the earlier segment where how all the dialogue felt supernatural. 100% agree. When it comes to this, I actually agree with a lot of what he says, but it doesn't really feel like things people would say to each other. And also the actual setup for him to actually go on his sermons or spiels, they're very loosely crafted. It's
Yeah,
just kind of like
completely
here's the
agree.
barest minimum of a reason to go off on the tangent I'm about to now.
And you can
Boom, I'm
maybe
taking
get
it.
away with one or
More
two,
of a
but it
direct
keeps
lecture than
happening. Like
more
we
of a
get like
natural
4 or 5 of
criticism.
these, and I
Yeah.
mean, gradually escalating in severity. Like to me, it just felt like, okay, let's maybe step away from this and write Luke how he should have been written in your perspective. If you're coming in to the story with these ideas, have us see more of that, and just a little bit of criticism in the bits where you can't change it because we did see what happened on page. Do it that
Mhm.
way rather than just insert around exclusively and add a bunch of strange scenes on top that just don't have anything to do with fixing the original. They just add more on top of it in the style that you prefer. It just, particularly tying around to the perspective of the character. He like you say, he soapboxes. He gets on his high horse, as it were, and berates Luke, like actively insults him at different points, and says, "Well, you're the Jedi Master. I shouldn't say this, but." And you know what you're doing, even though everything you've just stated clearly shows that you don't think he knows what he's doing, and he actively knows that and is saying that. And that's the point. I completely agree with the points being made, broadly speaking, because obviously we said in the trilogy review, Luke doesn't know what he's doing. He's inexplicably just terrible at teaching, and it's fine to be slightly flawed. That was something we liked, but as flawed as he is, as completely lacking in any of the qualities of a Jedi Master that we've come to appreciate, not just in the Old Republic or prequel era stuff, but just the original material as we saw it from things like Yoda and Ben. We don't get any of this kind of this gravitas, this vibe from him, and the same is true of this. This is just kind of re-highlighting all the problems and complaining about it rather than solving them within the story. And I was so excited because you guys had described most particularly the parts about this story where it is just a step aside from the academy and what's happening in the other room and all that stuff. I was so excited to see more of that and get those fixes. And when it was funny. Just a kind of let's just lambast what came before, I was like, oh, okay.
It's very awkward, but at the same time, it's like I'm also happy that we actually get to see Jedi training.
There is more of
it. We get more Jedi training in this one book than we got throughout the entire Academy trilogy, and the actual training sequences I actually, for the most part, really enjoy. I like Kieran's. I'm just gonna call I'll just call him Kieran here because everyone else did. I actually do like the fact that they kept that consistent. They didn't play that up for false drama. Like Kieran, other books probably would have done something like that. I appreciate they didn't. Minor thing. But I like the interactions he has with certain students. I like the sort of how do I explain the sort of dual mentorship role he kind of has with Cam Solusar. I like the fact that Tiona actually felt like a character in this book, unlike with the trilogy. Like her and Kieran's interactions very much felt like they were trying to help each other. Corran Horn and Mara Jade's friendship is honestly, in my opinion, always one of the most underrated dynamics in the NJO timeline. I love their friendship in later works, and I love how this sets it up. I love the sort of gruff mutual respect, but at the same time, when they have to buckle down, they could buckle down and work to each other. And to their credit, they're actually really effective. I love those interactions here. So at the same time, a lot of the flaws are very ham-fisted in how they're explained, but at the same time, the characters and the actual training is great to see. So it's
I was so distracted by the accent he went with for Tion, where she's like this southern.
I was as well. Not the choice I've gone for.
In my head, I will say, I was like,
Jedi
are you rogue? What's going on?
Rogue.
That's only an audiobook thing. But it was just she's all upset, and she's all like, "Oh, why you always picking on little old me? What are we doing?" And then I wanted her to continue like Benoit Blanc or something when Gantoris says there's been a murder or something. What is this accent you've gone with for this?
Apparently, Cam Solusar has a type.
Yeah.
But it was I also felt the author was very taken with Anderson's writing of the character Streen, who ironically I forgot about when we looked at those books, because I thought that was a nice scene that the two of them had. And it pretty much
on the roof, just
pretty much true to the character. It felt like a very natural kind of baton passing between the two authors. Oh, I know how to write this character also. I'll write him the same way you did. It felt very much like just porting that character over to the next without mutilating them in any way or forcing them into a scene where they didn't belong or things like that. I felt all of that was much stronger here. I think he's a better just writer of not just dialogue, but just
moments,
interpersonal connection,
just character. His character work is much better than Kevin J. Anderson's, in my opinion. But I mean, it doesn't get around the hurdle like what Callan's talking about of addressing the actual problem with the whole setup there. But as you were saying, I kind of agree with both of you in equal measure because, like Evan, I like a lot of this stuff where I kind of despised it in the trilogy, or it just wasn't there. Like the trilogy was very hands off, just like some training happened, and then we moved into the next room and something bad was discovered. Like so what? Okay, all right.
It's also very unique, like the sort of not only the Corellian heritage, but the Halcyon sort of where their strengths and where their weaknesses lie in the Force, and him discovering that. It's a very unique dynamic. What did we think of that and the way it was
But
presented? Because I
the actual
really enjoyed it.
the actual idea I have noticed is quite controversial. Some people hate that he can't do
Yeah.
telekinesis, and some people think it's interesting. I am almost completely neutral on this.
Mm.
That's never been like an aspect of Star Wars that I focus on that much. I'm kind of open-minded to however you want to treat, a character's relationship with the Force or whatever. Um, but I'm not like enthused by it. I think he worked with it quite competently. Like, you know what I mean? Like throughout the piece, the actual introductory scene where the way it was written, even though I had read the book before, I was like, what's happening? Like people are like looking up in the air at something that didn't happen or what? And then you're given like the explanation afterward with like the holocron and like Luke comes in and is like, here, I had to research what your issue is, but I kind of knew. And that was fine, but it was just like, and I'm glad that it was immediate because I was confused. And like the very next scene is like explaining, here's what
Mhm.
happened out there. But yeah, I would have written it a bit differently because I was baffled by what was happening. And that might be because of the first person perspective. It's very strong with him like thinking he's accomplished what he's done
Mm.
and then opening his eyes and realize he hasn't. But the fact that everybody else is like tripping, I was like, huh? It was just I felt
It's
like I was
just
missing
about
something.
sold by Luke's reaction. I feel because that was the bit that kind of tied it together, and then like you said, anyone who was confused gets that immediate explanation. So I like that as well. But it was that
Mhm.
same disjointed. The readers going along with the characters, like, huh? You have to play with that very carefully when you're talking about confusion, because otherwise it's just this
Mm.
disconnect. And you find yourself looking up from the book pages and going, what? What have I just read?
Yeah.
That's not the way to keep
Right.
them engaged. So it's challenging there. I just want to say, just the previous point you mentioned, because I was berating a lot this section of the book quite a lot. I completely agree on the character touches. I really enjoyed the Evan. You mentioned how you liked Corin was a mentor within the academy alongside Cam Solusar. I enjoyed that as well. I just liked it when it was that being present was fine, but it just felt very much like he was jointly running the thing with Luke. Like when it was lighter touch, when it was him talking to Streen and just letting Streen be Streen and not inserting the Corin aspect of it, that was where it was strongest for me, where he was just present and letting other characters be themselves rather than coming in and say, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to advise you, I'm going to tell you why you're wrong here, and all that stuff. That was the bit that I didn't quite like as much. Shall we
I think
say?
Fair
that
enough.
was that has that
Yeah.
aspect of the self-insert. Like, here's the
Yeah,
perspective I had reading these books, and just
exactly. Yeah,
I
Yeah.
mean, look at the way he wrote Kip, where he's even more absurd than what I thought of him in those books. Right? He was just like, are you literally insane? Like, I mean, like, where's the
I mean,
straitjacket?
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and he does not forgive him either. Like having the perspective of he's killed trillions. Like, should we just be fine with this? Like
I
that it
haven't
was.
forgiven him for that.
I,
Like,
I, I
yeah,
agree,
the
but
narrative
again,
just
I agree.
wants
But
you
it's the
to.
way it
Yeah.
expresses it. It's the way he
Mhm.
puts it into the narrative and makes it a question. Like, I
Mhm.
just it
Yeah.
feels to write it around it rather than just rush
Mhm.
into it as a brick wall. You know what I mean?
There's also the
I
weirdness of, again, like in a normal story, you wouldn't have had like the dual rivalry with Gantoris. Oh, Gantoris died. Here's Kip. Like you wouldn't have had
right.
like it would have been like you just pick one and go with that.
Yeah.
But he had to
Mhm.
work with the events of the previous trilogy again. So
Mm.
again, it's not really a defense. It's more just an explanation of like it's weird. It's
Mm.
flat out weird. But
It's
and again, that's why
strange.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure why make the I don't know why you had to force him into the. I probably wouldn't have done it. Like I would have opted for what I said, where do an iJedi portion from his perspective, do one for Kyle Katarn, do one for Tion, do one for
Mm.
Cam, you know what I mean, and just stitch them all like these little novelettes into like one book where it's iJedi and each one's talking about their experience of
I think that would have
becoming a
been
Jedi at Luke's
fantastic.
That would have
academy.
been
You
interesting.
know,
Yeah.
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 But
Just another point as
I
well.
will say
Sorry,
this
because I
too
meant to
for
mention it
me.
before. I'm
Sorry.
doing this a lot. I apologize. The point about him. You mentioned, Evan, you liked that he's Kieran Halcyon for a lot of this, and you like that was the way it was handled. I agree that it was. I was nice. They weren't going, oh, whoops, sorry, you're Kieran here, not Corin. I agree with that. But does anyone get why he was having to hide in the first place? Because the whole oh, he's a celebrity
Well,
Rogue
because he's
Squadron
he's a
pilot.
well-known figure.
It'll be
Yeah.
distracting to the other students. I felt like that feels like very much like readers of the book who loved X-Wing would think that, and basically no one else. Because I felt like, why would you care? I mean, Luke
It might
is
very much be
literally
exactly
the
that,
peak
yeah.
example of that, and they're not distracted by him. So it felt a bit odd to me, and the whole need to
Yeah.
hide felt completely off.
I think it was an idea that might have made more sense when he was like plotting this out initially. But I agree, it needed some more pieces to make it
Mhm.
fit. Although I have to confess, this is a poor book to like take breaks between, and that ended up happening for us because we kind of like staggered reading this just for real life reasons. So picking it back up after not having been with it for a while, I think it's possible they might have a good explanation that I just don't remember.
They
I just wanna
played with
get
it in
ahead of that
retrospect
one.
after the fact because the oh god, names escaped me.
They
The
didn't want
Imperials,
any
the
yeah.
what are they called? The
Invids,
Invids, thank you. Yeah, the
Invids, yeah.
Invidious. Yeah, the Invids weren't able to recognize his name, which is helpful from that. But if that had been the core point from the start, that's fine. But the Jedi don't need to not be in the know, then, do they? The Jedi can know. It felt odd
Right.
that it was
Well,
because
half of them
we don't
fall
want
to the
we
dark
don't.
side, though.
Well, that's true.
That's a good
He
theory,
didn't
yeah,
know that
yeah,
going
yeah.
in though.
Yeah.
That was unexpected. But it was just that we didn't want to distract them from their training. It's like, okay, really,
Yeah.
you're not that much of a celebrity guy.
Sure. But I mean, they
Added
do
to the
the
whole
bare
main
minimum of
character
saying they
syndrome issue.
don't
That was
want
all.
right, and they do the bare minimum by saying like they don't want news of Corran training because that might tip off the Invids as a way. So it's again, it's flimsy, but I could kind of deal with it, and also just kind of I like what they do with the sort of Kieran identity and how it sort of relates to his overarching theme of self-identity and legacy. It also allows for one of, in my opinion, like one of the funniest like lines in the entire book where he's like comforting Tion after after what happened, and the holocron accidentally picks up on his name, and it says, and Tion asks like, "Oh, are you Kieran Halcyon? Come back to us?" And she's like, and then he responds by saying, "I don't even think carbon freezing would preserve me that long." I don't know why, but like little dialogue bits like that. I don't know why I found that genuinely funny, even though it is meant to be more of an emotional scene. I don't know.
I
Just
think
my
it's because
thing.
it's an emotional scene. That wouldn't be a line worth anything if it wasn't coming off the back of a sad emotional scene. You get away with a lower bar for humor by the nature of how we are when we're in that state. I think it works nice, and also it fits the character of Kieran, and it was just a nice
Right.
little human moment for me.
Yeah, and also just like the development of his like capabilities with the energy absorption and the sort of, the mind alteration. I do like the way that this book sort of really just emphasizes how lethal for all intents and purposes like mental manipulation can be from a Jedi perspective when you take it to the nth degree, like the things you can really do with that. I mean, they play with it like in a lot of, very unique ways that I don't think a lot of writers really did at the time. And again, it's a good way of sort of giving him a different flavor of Jedi than obviously his peers. Luke does have very kind of a strange bit of I always found this very weird, just kind of in retrospect, when he's with the holocron scene and he's like, "Oh yeah, my father had the ability to absorb energy as well," and he would
Yeah.
sometimes take the energy he did and funnel it into telekinesis. It's like, when
I
did
watched
you
that
see
movie
Vader
too.
do this?
He's talking about
Like, when did
Hans,
you
Hans
see Vader-
Blaster is what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
literally it.
Yep.
When he's at the
He
dinner table.
describes it as though something he witnessed. It's like, I don't remember you ever witnessing him doing that.
Yeah.
He had a dream.
I was
where
going to say, maybe it was in his
retroactively saw
dream.
it through, he retroactively saw it through Leia's eyes or something one night when she remembered that. Some hand wavy nonsense.
But that point,
whatever.
that Bespin scenario was one of the things I liked though actually in this sequence. I can't recall the exact context of how it happened in the book. I think it might have been a bit of a loose setup, but the actual idea of it being something they talk about, I rushed into danger because of my emotions. You have to be careful about that, Corran, and Corran taking the opposite perspective. But because you did that, this and this happened, etc. I like the way it played with some of these things.
Because
it was
felt
a bit
real.
Yeah, it was a bit hammy in the fact that he knew all of the details that we knew as viewers of the film, because obviously they've sat down and talked about every little nuanced detail in story time with Luke at the Academy. Like, it felt a bit like he'd seen the films himself at points. But that
Hey,
that
you know what?
aside,
Can I
I
just
thought it
say,
was really nice to touch on some of these things as like concepts from the Academy.
the way our world's going, and with Star Wars having the tech it does, everything's on film there. You can find footage of it.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
if you
true.
want to.
You could just watch the whole rebellion playing out.
I agree with you, but
Exactly,
I'm kind of kidding.
No,
But,
for sure, you are right there. It's in a holocron. He's downloaded
Yeah.
it into his own personal holocron files.
I mean, Luke revealing his father as Vader, like, to his students. I also
Okay,
like
I was
that.
gonna ask about that, like how you because when he first told that story, he's all, "Okay, you all remember Darth Vader, right? Well, I'm telling you, he was good." It's
The
Sir.
way it talked
It's
about
just
it,
like-
yeah. It's like, excuse
Yeah,
me?
I mean, that was-
that's a-
This is
that's
the
a
man who,
complex
from their
explanation.
perspective, was directly responsible for the obliteration of Alderaan, you know, which is talked about a lot
Yeah.
later in this story.
True.
Now he explains himself, but the idea that he would have left it at that is mind-boggling to me. Like, where they're all just like, what? Like, what are you talking
What
about?
you say? Yeah.
Yeah. But,
We've
yeah.
often talked about the fact that Darth Vader gets a slice of redemption pie, as your father calls it, Matt.
Yeah.
that is
That's what he
the
always called
best
it
you
growing
can
up.
give
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Speaking of other Dark Lords, Exar Kun is in this book.
Much better handled. Much better handled.
Yes.
I'm not sold on it. I'm not like loving this as we go through the story, but
Yeah.
way better than Academy. I'll give it that much.
Yeah. I
Yes,
agree.
he actually
It
feels
also-
intimidating and effective in this, and he actually feels like an actual eldritch sort of horror. By the way, I mean the audio drama voice for him, whew, that was certainly something.
I laugh because of the way that he's ultimately like, goaded
Dealt
by
with.
them, like the kindergarten jokes.
Oh,
and
that's
everything
one of
at
the
the
best
end,
scenes in the book. You kidding me? I love that.
I you would have to change. Like, if you imagine turning this into a movie, like the vibes
know,
would just be
right?
so off.
Yeah,
Like if you were
what?
just coming in there.
What? It's very comic book.
Yeah, but he is much better handled. It almost felt like an accident, like in the trilogy for me. Just like he just there's blunder into Dark Spirit. Like, why? Which one was it? Exar Kun, fine. Like, even though it's nothing to do with his character or like his characterization in the trilogy at all. It's just like, for continuity's sake, he's the one that you have to go with on that planet. This was definitely like he was a presence here, but again, I kind of it's funny to me that we have to defeat Exar Kun and then move on with what the book wants to be about, really.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I mean,
it
it's
is
kind of
much
what,
better.
tie it
that's
in
kind of what the
better.
Academy trilogy did anyway. So it's
Well,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Yes,
we
I
talked about that
know.
with the third book.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But tie it in
Yeah.
with the main story better. You know, have Mirax have been chasing some smugglers who were smuggling Exar Kun artifacts. Have it tie into the Gen Sarai's
Sure.
polluted
And
history. Have it
literally
tie
anything.
into the
Yeah.
Invids. Have it be. Have it have a reason that he's chasing this particular Academy scenario, and also why he has personal stakes with Exar Kun. When Exar Kun shows him a vision of his wife, that could have been much more perfectly tied in that he'd met
That was
her
a great
astray or
scene, though.
something.
That was
Great
a really
scene.
good scene.
Great
I
scene,
have to say,
but it's just
yeah.
it didn't have anything to do with the larger story. It was, and also reminded you that we're supposed to care about his wife's missing. It needs to be tied in much more neatly. All of this.
I agree with you on, like, just as a holistic sense, just as a narrative as a whole, it needs more stitching together. But given the fact that this was published in '98, I want to say it's before like you get like Anakin having bad dreams. So it's not like ripping off an idea like that. You know what I mean? It's you could say it's just a classic idea. Like in the original films, they do it just through dialogue, where like the Emperor's like, your friends don't have long, do they? Like that kind of a thing. So it's a recycled idea, but the way that he wrote it, very strong and very like very visual, like very, but at the same time mostly through dialogue. But I felt like I could see it like in my head, and it just felt very kind of raw and like a sensitive issue is the wrong way to put it. Like that doesn't play it justice. It's because it's also like you're a disappointing son. Also, kind of. It's like it filters between many other things. You know.
Yeah, it was hard.
And he's got
but
some
it was
daddy
like
issues. This guy.
playing
that comes up a
at
lot
those
throughout the story.
insecurities with the familial dynamic. I mean, it's a very strong way of like getting to the core of it, and the breakdown that he has, like the way that he sort of gradually gets worn down by that, those psychological attacks. It's powerful, and
that might have been my favorite scene in like the first in that whole, well, certainly it's my favorite scene in that portion of the book. It might be my favorite scene in like the first half of the book. You know what I mean? Just like I think it's a very
I probably agree with that actually, and most of the stuff I love is in that first half. So it's a strong moment. I would have loved for that to be tied stronger to the rest of the story. Good use of Mara though. That was the other thing. She steps in.
Oh, when she comes in, that's brilliant. So on brand for her, and starts like,
oh, they've done something with Mara in an Academy context.
Yeah.
Lovely, because she just
She
left
was
in the previous
trashed in the
trilogy.
Oh my
she was trashed, and she wasn't in Dark Empire at all. So it was like,
I was like, what is happening?
This is a character, right? Like, is she still a character or not? So yeah, like this is a firm,
and it
again,
justified her presence within this story.
is like such a great dynamic, and I love the fact that they keep that continuity throughout.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, Evan, because that was it had a weird vibe for me because again, it was that Core and Horn fanfiction aspect that was present strongly for their scenes. But her being used in this scene, her having the direct tie to I'm sensing a disturbance in the Force. I'm acutely, specifically capable of picking up Dark Lords, particularly just because of my history. Having that, justify her presence in the story, I really liked because otherwise, again, like Academy, she'd just fly off somewhere and that would be that, and it just makes no sense. Using her and using her well was really appreciated.
Tonally, it worked really well.
And the fact that she was just berating Axel Kuhn, she was like a tonal salve for the scene. Like if you were,
that made sense.
Exactly, she could come in and go, "This is comic book nonsense. What the hell are you talking about? Like this, you're a diva. You're a Dark Lord. Please."
I served the Emperor, bitch. Like
I was gonna say exactly. I was the right hand. I was the Emperor's hand. You think you're something? Like please, my Emperor actually won. He beat the Jedi. You lost. All that stuff. Like it was also, like a tonic for the readers who were sitting in that headspace themselves.
Brilliant, yeah.
So I don't mean to lose you with this, Evan. We'll dance over this point like very quickly, but there were a couple like Thoth moments where he got like a proper comeuppance where like this was kind of like a less elaborate wise man's fear, like where it's like the plot's all over the place. Some of it's brilliant, and like you have like this egotistic character who's good at everything. But like I did like the moment it was like you can't affect the physical world, and like
what a bet! I love that.
That worked so well. Like it would have been like this is a ridiculous character, but because the character was so like up his own ass about everything and always like schooling everyone, including the Grand Master and all these, it was like you're not just wrong. You're like as wrong as it's possible to be.
I loved it. And also the reclarification, even if you had been right, which you weren't, I burnt Gantoris to death, motherfucker. You think it's going to be true here in my seat of power? This is my throne room kind of thing. You're like, apply some logic. I loved it.
Brilliant.
That was a great bit.
Way to dial down the Mary Stew potential issues you could have had, Gary Stew.
That was falling right off the rooftop.
Yeah,
right off the rooftop right there.
Literally, yeah.
Congratulations. That was the stupidest thing you've ever seen. Oh, I love it.
Again, it's all in the dialogue and the delivery. It's so like the timing of it all. I mean, again, it's like it's character acting without there actually being anything on screen, which is not easy to do. So again, all the props in the world.
And he does get the absolute shit kicked out of him as well. It's not like it's just one telekinetic punch that caught him by surprise. He's just thrashed. We need that.
Well, I mean, even the way he describes his bones like snapping, it's brutal. Like for real. Like it does not mess around with any of that. I mean, you just imagine from his perspective, like just all broken on the floor as this fucking eldritch spirit is like hanging over you. That's horrifying.
Narrative performance was very strong as well. Suitably over the top, in particular here, but also just generally the emotion was good. I thought he did a really good job on all sides.
The only issue I had with him in the whole book, narration-wise, I think, was Tion, like just being from the top for some reason.
Which I want to point out, he did make work. I would never have made that choice myself, but I feel like he did make it work if you had to choose that.
It worked, but I wanted her almost to be more camp and just be like, "There's been a murder here, like you're a suspect," or like, I mean, it was crazy. It was like, what?
I think it's just like it's not what a lot of people probably would have expected, but then again, it's like, what were we expecting?
Yeah, no, exactly.
Is
there anything else?
Although it does make it a little awkward in future audiobooks, though, that would take place after this, and she doesn't have it at all. It's like it's a weird mesh.
With that.
She's a bard. She was just doing she was in character for that moment. She's a character actress.
She literally is a bard.
Was that bit where like Kip storms in, he's like, "You got the song all fucking wrong." Like, and she's like, "What?" Like
another little wise man's fear moment as well. Funnily enough,
very much
ahead of its time.
Oh my god, yeah. Rothfuss must have read this book. Like I bet he did. Anyway, so that brings us to like the falling out, like between like Luke and
Exar Kun is defeated off panel.
Right, in classic fashion, because that pretty much happened in the trilogy. But so over and done with very quickly. So he's like, okay, well that's done. Then we have like this. Well, I guess it's sort of like a clash over ideas with like the Kip point, right? Like that's kind of like where all like what it really things come to a head. It's not so much. That was the funny thing. Like you had the Exar Kun plot in the trilogy, then you had like Kip's going AWOL and going crazy and blowing people up. And what does Luke have to say about that? So what do we think of like? I mean, I don't know what to say about this scene because, like, I agree. I agree with Corin at the same time.
Yeah, he's not wrong. I do kind of like I kind of like the dialogue in vacuum where he sort of describes Kip as being, oh well, he's locked into the Jedi way forever now. Like he has no other possible path. I think in a vacuum, that's kind of an interesting bit of dialogue, but it's then when you consider the context around it, things get a little muddy.
It, it's to me, it's hard to not make Luke sound like a really soft fop about this kind of scene. Like when it comes to the fact that they've just found out that he's seen that Kip has literally killed trillions. I mean, trillions of people are dead, right? The point that you focus on most in that context for me is the fact that he was possessed, and you talk about how much that impacted his influences, his actions, how much it influences choices, etc. And which is a point that Corran does raise. You know, he's like, nah, I've seen possessed, and that was where I would have focused on. I would have said to Luke, you have a very keen perspective. You have a very kind of sensible view here. You have experience, but there is a piece of this that you are missing. You have not experienced, and then that then becomes a lesson he gets later on when he's struggling with the dark side himself, and it's in the seductive sense, in the kind of like elusive kind of ephemeral aspects he is surprised by. I would tie those two together narratively and help focus that on why Luke is so confidently justifying what Kip has done, or not justifying it, but forgiving it. Because as it's written, it does just come off as like, well, people make mistakes. Like, no, not that level of mistake. They don't. That is unacceptable. But you have to focus on the possession aspect, and that wasn't made a big enough a deal of for my money.
That's kind of the core problem, I guess, because like earlier when like Luke's talking about like Vader, his whole point is about like how there's no such thing as like a final, you know, decision or something, or I can't remember exactly how he put it, but like he was basically painting a portrait like no matter how far over the line you go, you can still come back. Like that's basically his opinion or his view. That's his, and so it becomes. What's interesting because it's kind of built up to in Corran being largely, I think, right. Like when he talks about like Kun's spirit before they actually defeat him, he's like, well, we got to get rid of him. There's no bargaining with him. He's had 4,000 years and he's not going to change. If in that time he has not decided to change, he's beyond redemption. And there seems to be very little evidence indicating that he's wrong on that. Like in terms of Kun. But when it comes to like the point that Luke wants to make, it does become like this kind of question about like platitudes or principles, like kind of a thing. I mean, I think I think it would have been stronger if Luke kind of like leveled with him, saying, "Yeah, like some of what I'm saying might just be what I'm choosing to believe, but ultimately, if I don't believe that redemption's possible, um,
I
what's the
wouldn't have
point of
come
doing
back.
anything, really?"
Yeah, and also I wouldn't have come back.
That's more proof, I get, like that's sort of soft proof, but and that would have been maybe like the better way is like rather than Corran just coming in and disagreeing and shouting about everything and being right, like or whatever in the author's eyes or just in the framing of the scene, if it would have been like Luke saying, get out of here until you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
like kind of a thing,
Yeah,
like
the
I
power
won't
move,
train you
and
anymore
showing that
until you
he's a
get it.
Jedi master who has walked the walk,
Yeah.
and isn't just talking
Right.
the talk. Because Kip thinks that, Corran thinks that's true of himself, and to a certain extent, it is. He is accurate in all of these evils that he's bringing up that he's faced, etc., and he's not been persuaded by. And fallen to, but by the same token, and this is how you play the scene. Both parties are right in different ways at different extents. Luke is also right in the fact that but you haven't faced the things that you haven't faced the ephemeral supernatural aspect of it, the quality of it, and more importantly, just at a personal level, you haven't faced the temptations you don't know that you're susceptible to. What you don't know is always the biggest threat, and when you tie that as a psychological fear to the idea of the physical concept of the dark side, that's when story is strongest, that's when character is strongest, and that I think is where you sell the kind of spiritual personal mastery aspect of what Luke is by this point in his own journey. Because he's not Grandmaster Luke yet. He is flawed. He should be stumbling. He shouldn't be a natural teacher. All the things we praised the concept phase aspect of Academy for, that should be present here. But he should still have that early mastery gravitas. He should have that ability to handle Corran to an extent, particularly in this context, which is his whole thing. His whole thing is about redemption. His whole thing is about coming back from the dark. His whole thing is about seeing the good in people, those who are lost. If he can't sell this point, not just to Corran, but to the reader, then I feel like the writer himself hasn't truly understood Luke in the way he thinks he has. I mean, he goes and tells the exact opposite. He says, "You've taken the wrong lessons from saving your father." Has he though, or is he just not getting them across to you well enough? And I would have tied all of that to the perspective of Horn and have that be part of his character growth and character development to help sell to us that he understands the author. Understands the idea of Luke as Grandmaster, as leader of his academy. I felt like there was too much of a berating, soapboxing, I know better than you, holier than thou quality here. that doesn't have a comeuppance in the same way that we have with the physical sense of Exar Kun just beating the shit out of him in the previous scenes. They need to be all tied together much stronger there for me.
Mm-hmm. I also agree that would have also helped kind of better set up Luke coming back later and reconnecting with him, and the sort of justification that he sort of spins with that kind of would have landed a bit stronger too, if they had more of a, hey, this person's making a point, this person's making a point, they're both valid in their own ways, but they're still separated by this XYZ. So yeah, more abrupt transitions in the book, and definitely one of the weaker ones.
I also feel like, just as a point for like Luke's character agency, he's had this quality where he feels remote in a way that doesn't feel correct, and like it doesn't feel like when you're watching like Return of the Jedi and he's coming in, he's trying to be like all wise and stuff, like he's owning the situation at Jabba's palace. That's not entirely a performance. He has advanced like since Empire, but he's also he's also trying to be a model Jedi where there's still something else inside of him that's impatient or not perfect or willing to go sort of a darker route. No matter what they say, he chucked those people. And just not going down that rabbit hole. But anyway, uh, he clearly, like, the whole point of the scene in the Emperor's throne room is that, like, ultimately he does give in to his emotions there. He breaks for a bit, but he regains himself without actually like fully, again, they're trying to do it more profoundly with something like Dark Empire. I don't like that, but with just taking that as read, they're trying to say, yes, he's fallen, he's gone far, but he's returned. And I think it just has to be like this sort of thing. Like, if he's the one drawing a line in the sand, rather than Corrin, and saying, I'm not teaching somebody who's not even willing to entertain the idea of forgiveness here. Like, I'm just like, you're unsuitable to be a Jedi if you're not going to, if you're just going to come in with this blanket view that you've already got and that you're like attached to. I can't teach you. This guy's already resubmitted for himself for training after doing what he's done. You are arguing with me. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing, like, about this point. You're not willing to go further. I think I wanted Luke to have
a backbone.
More, yeah, just he
That's what I mean by
doesn't.
being a fop. He's just
To me,
very, like,
but to me, it
wishy-washy.
doesn't. Yeah. He doesn't. I don't know who to pin that on, because it feels like they're intentionally writing the character this way, and I guess it's just a disagreement with them about how they interpret Luke as a character,
Right.
because it's there in the trilogy. It's not just like hands off, but
Yeah.
it's like this weird.
The Academy trilogy, Luke deserves to be berated like this, but Luke as a whole
This
aggregate,
one,
that's the problem.
Agreed.
This one's closer to correct, but it's missing that bit that, like, it's missing what would sell the kind of seeming standoffishness, like where he's just more open to possibility, and ultimately it is a risk to be a Jedi. It just is a risk. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's no
that
getting
sense
around
of
that.
experience and command and gravitas, being the Jedi Master, being the explanation for why all these people are looking up to him. Like, Corrin actively calls it out. Like, you're just fumbling around like the rest of us. Kuhn is right about that. Why are we following you? He basically just outright says it. And that's a author complaint of the Academy. It's not a correction of Academy's flaws. It's
Yes.
a problem for me.
Yeah. But then we transition into the next sequence pretty harshly, as you guys mentioned, but we do move along.
I do love the sequence, though.
He goes to the source of the Corellian Jedi heritage, Corellia.
And visits one of my favorite characters in the whole story. It's criminal we didn't get more of. His grandfather is fantastic.
I love just the visual representation of Corellia and the way that it's described. Again, like you were talking earlier, Matt, about the fact that even though it's first person, the way that it's described does paint a very clear picture in your head. I definitely feel that during the Corellian sequences. That was really fantastic.
Well, he talks about like how he could see like raising a family here as opposed to like Coruscant, which is also like a big city planet, but like not every city feels the same way. Like he himself firmly considers himself a city boy, but he doesn't like Coruscant the way he loves Corellia.
If Coruscant is New York, then Corellia is Chicago. Kind of give the city just in his descriptions alone, I think is really nice. And again, like just the the themes of family and heritage and legacy and just the way that I kind of play with that. When he go Rostek Horn, first of all, I mean, talk about a character with a lot of just energy just from the get-go. Definitely I was getting a little, I mean, he's not like Tony Soprano, but I was kind of getting some Sopranos vibes from him, just in the sense of this old guy who commands every room that he's in irregardless and doesn't really have to lift a finger to actually make his point. Again, not in like an evil sort of way, but I really liked his introduction. I thought was really strong.
Yeah, I mean, talking about someone who's in command, this is the kind of vibe, the gravitas of a different tone from a different area that we should have been seeing from Luke, and that we just talked about there. This is the character I want us to book about. This is a political intrigue, Andor style, Mon Mothma positioned character that we could really get some mileage out of. I mean, we talked about in the past detective stories and like a Coruscanti vibe. A Corellian detective series with this guy as the chief of police would be strong.
Corsac, I mean, yeah, it writes itself. I mean,
Mm.
and again, the world building that it does with him, and again, just the dialogue. Again, I keep saying this over and over again, but it feels so real. Like this is just a dude chatting with his grandfather, but obviously with a Corellian sort of flair, and I
Mm.
like that.
Mhm.
It's and like again, I love the fact that they're digging up when they're digging, the holes in the back, and he's like, if you could lift it another way, it's like that I can't, but they're gonna do it anyway. I get again the little ribbing. I just love.
And
Um,
is that a digging shovel, whatever the line was? Sorry. I love that. Yeah, I dug the first hole. You can dig it back up again. It's such a grandfather grandson moment. I love it. And yeah, I got a lot of Mass Effect vibes from this particular era.
I
By
was
the way.
gonna. I was just gonna say, it felt like Mass Effect to me. Like, where
Yeah.
this story is not super like, it's not like in spots. Don't take me too literally, but it's not
Mm.
like the deepest thing I've ever read at all. But like if when it feels lived in, it feels lived in that kind of space opera kind of like way where
Yeah.
like particularly like Mass Effect 2, where like you're just dealing with like like stuff going on the Citadel and like helping solve crimes and stuff like that. It just feels very like, okay, this is a setting that we live in and we're just getting on with business. We're not like trying to sell the reader on the artificiality of like this world we've constructed.
Mm.
It just feels like we're moving through this space and we're absorbing it the way that a character that actually resides here does. There was just like a lot of like really efficient, like
mhm,
just cool little world building and character beats, and just
mhm,
a strong setup for like what this person represents within the course of like this society and
mhm,
this story and like how they operate. And just like with like the gardens and like with the plants
Mm.
and like the
Exactly.
ideas of like what the plants represent, like when he sends one to somebody, like and people like trip
I
over.
have to
I
have
don't know,
my
is there a
fun.
hidden meaning to yeah,
I have to
a
have
hidden
my
meaning to
fun.
this?
brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's
It's
literally
subtle,
giving them
but
the
I love it.
information they want. He's not even lying to them
And
in
it
a way.
doesn't
I love it.
feel like super realistic. It's just a believable scene. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like a well done play. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're not actually
exactly,
looking
exactly.
for reality. You're looking
Yeah,
for
the human drama.
believability and
Mm.
Mhm,
My
yes,
favorite
yes.
piece of it was the fact that the plants, as in the informants that were placed on him, were people he had specifically put in the path of others to choose to select for him because they were all loyal. Like, that the way that's sold, and the way he just sort of just humming to himself and chuckling as he's telling the story, I love it. It's they nailed the kind of grandfather quality within that larger domineering political power archetype just to perfection,
mhm,
and that's required because the amount of times we get like Corin just kind of huffing his own concept of my father and my lineage throughout the story. If you don't feel that yourself when you meet them, everything else falls flat on its face. It's such an integral part of his personal journey. You need to sell it, and I think they did very, very well. I'm on board the Corin lineage, the Horn lineage rather, just as much as the
mhm,
Halcyon from everything we see in the story, and that was very well handled.
mhm. And I also love the way Rostek just talks about Nija. Like he really does kind
Mm.
of he reads as though he's describing, this is what my best friend was like. Oh, he would often joke about like, doing XYZ. Like you can feel, but then when he gets like more serious, it describes his tone as kind of getting like deeper. Like I like the fact that it's like he can be simultaneously happy to reminisce about his best friend, but he also, when the tragedy of it all and what ultimately befell his best friend, it still hurts him to this day.
Mhm.
And the steps that he had to do to kind of preserve that legacy, and just his friends and his family. I mean, it's it's given an appropriate amount of weight without distracting from, the core dynamic between him and Corin. And I love the part where he tells him that he's going to preserve the Halcyon lineage and the Horn lineage, and the way that it
Mm,
describes his grandfather just kind of taking that in. It's like you could just imagine him thinking to himself, like, you didn't have to say that, but it means the universe to me that you did say that, grandson and all that. I'm like, oh, like I'm sorry, like I felt it right here, like for real, like all
yeah,
the way.
just that these aren't people who talk about their feelings very much. That's very clear. Like they beat you over the head with
Mhm.
that fact, both in outright saying it and also demonstrating it. So when you do get those moments of like personal connection where they've kind of just the idea of shifting perspective from being kind of mentor student, grandparent child, that kind of dynamic of this is the first time I'm coming to him as a peer who can just have conversations this way. There's no professional dynamic getting in the way even when we're adults. He's layering on all of these different aspects of their relationship and making you feel each part of this grandfatherly superior kind of presence. It's so well handled, and just on the political level, on the personal level, on the spiritual level, on the fact that he's not technically biologically his grandfather, it's his step grandfather, but that doesn't matter because he's Horn first in his mind, and what that means, like you said, the honor and the gift that represents, and again because they're not personal people, him outright saying it just chef's kiss. And again,
And
I'll
it's
remind,
worth.
this is, you can imagine the exact day I read this scene.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
come on,
And, I mean,
right
you
in the
even
gut.
see that, like, even, decades from now, he still goes by Horn, and same with
Mm,
his children and all that.
as
That's
well he
just
should.
how it is. And again, it's just, again, those themes of legacy and belonging, and, what family truly is at its core. And, it's about the individuals and what they do for each other. I mean, it is just, again, I can't praise enough. And again, even the reveal of, like, the flowers and the data that's, like, in them, like, I mean, the tech around that is, like, you could have various discussions about, how that's actually achieved. But also, minor little bit, I do love the fact that, not long before he leaves, he tells Rostek, hey, all this information about the Corellian Jedi legacy, can you give this to Master Skywalker as well? And Rostek's like, done. I like the fact that, like, even though they had that falling out, he still respects over and above what all this information could mean for a restored Jedi Order. And
Mm,
again, it's also a nice way of kind of teeing up the reconciliation later in the book. Again, very minor, but it's a bit of dialogue that I do appreciate.
mm. Love it all. This is my favorite part of the whole book, I think, off the top of my head.
Hmm.
There are super strong
And
scenes from other aspects, but this is the most kind of neatly tied together, cohesive sequence that has relevance with the larger character journey for me. And I think it was brilliant.
and, and then Rostek being like, "So you want to go tear up the
Yes,
city like four men, dude?" It's like, oh, it's like, that's, if this was a TV show, that would be a great way to, like, and roll credits, like, right after that as they go into the city. I mean, that was just, again, it's
sirens.
perfect.
Yeah,
It's
sirens
it's
on.
it's, it's
And
so
the
nice.
other aspect as well, the fact that he says, I'm not going to do any of this yet. I'll we can wait to discuss this, or we can wait for me to take off on this journey. Right now, I want to spend some time with my grandfather. That again, just all that tied together,
Oh,
beautiful.
I mean, oh, I'm like, oh, my soul.
Write a story about Rostak Horn and his grandson. Damn it, I want a Corsac story.
I'd read the hell out of that in a second.
Mm.
Transition now into
The worst part of the book.
Yeah. So,
Pilot
Um,
so
Empire.
after talking about everything we just have with the grandfathers in the garden, that was most powerfully tied to the journey of Corin Horn as a character, and I love it for that. Kieran Halcyon, depending on perspective, you decide.
I mean, depending on his
But
perspective
there's only
too.
one
I
right
mean,
answer.
yes.
Yeah, no, I think that was really solid. I love that part. The transition from that to this is bad by itself, but also the sequence itself, the pirating and the piloting, and that, to me, it was all good. I enjoyed it, but it did not need to be here for the story to work the way it could have done. You could have lifted this wholesale out of the story and just had them find the invids a different way, or Booster fast tracks him into the invids from his own little setup that he's been working ahead of time. Um,
Mhm.
all of this is basically superfluous. It's solid and engaging. And I think, like you said, Matt, before, the biggest problem for me is the medium. If this hadn't been one book, if this had been multiple, or if it had been a comic run, or it either needs to be cut down or gets stretched out. And either one of those situations, I think, is served better by a comic or a game or a
He
series or whatever.
he loves to write a space fight,
Yeah,
so I
Yeah.
guess that's
This
sorry, I'm
does feel
getting
like probably like an X-wing book that was never made.
yeah, and it's good. It's good X-wing material. If you like the Starfighter stuff, I enjoy that as much as the next guy. But it's just if it's not the point of the story, if it doesn't add anything to the specific narrative or the character journey we're seeing, which this doesn't really, add anything to it. It's just a stepping stone to getting to saving Mirax, and even that gets really heavily sidetracked again.
Yeah, and this
just
is also like again, it's just a lot of it's just kind of him just going about his business, and it's
Yeah,
very interesting. Like I like the actual dynamics with him and the squad. I like that this is very much a inverse of what he's used to with like the rogues and all that. Very intentionally, it's like the grittier, darker. I do like the fact that he kind of has this realization, like, oh, like not all the invids are like what I expected. There are some decent people here who are just trying to get by. I like that perspective. I like seeing that other side. I like him having those revelations. It's just
Oh, maybe Luke was right a little bit. Tie it to that.
yes, that too.
Have some relevance.
Those are all great on paper. It's just again, it just feels sort of disjointed. I like his at the same time though. I like his Batman Jedi sort of dynamic. Him
Batman
going
and
up.
Alfred, yeah. I mean, that's kind of almost a follow-up sequence, isn't it? Because there's two separate ones. You've got the initial training and integrating with the Invids aspect, trying to do all the getting in with the squadron, and then you got to the whole what happens immediately after that. When he's like, okay, I've made a revelation. I can't be all Jedi. I can't be all Horn. I have to merge the two, and then he becomes Batman, and he even immediately gets his own Alfred as well. That was where I was like, what is happening in the story?
I will say I do. Yeah, I do want to say I do love that dream sequence where he kind of looks into the mirror and he sees, Halcyon looking back at him, and the kind of shock to his system that represents, the sort of the click behind his eyes where he realized, oh, I can't, like you were saying, I can't be all one or the other. I'm gonna be me, and the sort of revelation that he has, I adore that. And I think again, like the sort of it's very realistic because you're not necessarily bound. Legacy is important, but it doesn't have to lock you in. And I think that's kind of one of the major themes of this book overall. And it also just kind of helps to, again, from a world building perspective, like, how different factions view the Jedi and how scary a Jedi can really be, from the perspective of like your average person. All that is fantastic. I love the characterization. It's just, it could have been a lot shorter, and we could have chopped off a lot before we got here.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I completely agree with that particular moment. I thought that was strong. My issue with it, and I'd hazard a guess this is similar with you, Matt. You mentioned earlier into the discussion about how a lot of the kind of good character beats were a bit repetitious, and you were
yeah,
spending a lot of time talking
yes,
about the same questions in his mind, and
yeah,
I wonder about this, I wonder about that. They're not identical. They do develop on from each other, but they're very similarly portrayed. They're very similarly they're reaching similar conclusions, just with a little bit
he has
shaved
two
off
of
the edge
these
added to it.
revelations like pretty
Yeah,
Right.
quickly together.
yeah, exactly, and particularly in this section of the book, it's the post
Yeah,
garden and post invid situation.
yeah,
They're close together, even though they're probably quite far away in page length. In terms of story feel, they feel very one after the other,
Right,
and
because like when he
that
meets
diminished it for me.
Elagos, and that kind of like his connection to his grandfather, it kind of sets up those dynamics all over again.
Yeah, and I didn't need
and also
that
something
either. Like I felt that made the
I
story a bit small. If it had been, if the journey had been more tightly knit together as a whole, I think it would have worked stronger. But because it's a bit stop start and we're cutting sequences and we're not bridging between them very well, and we're so recently meeting this character and we just met the grandfather, I feel like it was a lot happening in one in quick succession that didn't quite gel as naturally as it could have done if it had been more split apart.
yeah, a lot of this stuff doesn't really scene to scene. I don't have too many problems, including in this portion of the book, but just in an overall sense, I agree that this. I probably wouldn't have removed it completely because his strength, not well. I think he is strong with character work, but like his interest, his chief interest is he likes writing space battles. Clearly,
Mm.
so he needed a reason to incorporate that. I get that, but I think instead of lifting it out, I think it could have been much truncated, as Evan said. It could be much shorter than it all is,
Mhm.
and the similarity between some of these moments doesn't feel it doesn't really feel intentional. It's
Mm.
one thing if you're doing something with intentionality or by intentionality. This feels sort of haphazard, and I think it does leave a question of like, why are we getting all of this? Like you can have some of this. You
Mm.
don't need all of this, and
Right.
you literally just don't need it. And then some of it is trying to lay a fertile seed bed for like him to wrestle with some of these ideas of do the ends justify the means, which when the character is introduced doesn't feel like the most core question he's asking himself, but it feels like that's what the story has convinced itself it's about by this
Mm.
point in the story. And I just don't really feel like I think you should have like set that up better if you really wanted him to be wrestling with that question so much. But that's the reason to have him involved with a group of people like this. It could have been any old thing, but throw him into a situation like this and have him constantly questioning his morals, or like the ends justifying the means. And the only awkward bit to me about that, the thing that I just had no use for, is like him wrestling with whether or not he's going to sleep with her.
Yeah.
um
Likewise.
that
Yeah,
that
Tavira was
that had me
yeah.
questioning many things.
Mm.
Even in a Gary Stu sense, I don't get what that's doing here. Like, like, I don't get what that adds to the story. But it was also interminable. It was like the better part of an entire chapter where he just
Mm.
went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then explaining why it's wrong to cheat. And it was like in long form. And I was just like, who is
And oh, I'm
this
glad I had this
for?
revelation.
Like,
It's like what?
yeah,
Right.
like
You don't really
who's
need
the,
that.
is
You
it?
shouldn't have to need that explained.
Yeah, and it's fine to play with that temptation space, but it's just that's not clearly what the story isn't about. He's not someone who needs this lesson in everything we've seen up to this point. And this part of
Who
the
who
Right.
story,
who
like you said, Matt, is
who
very
is
much
it
like,
for?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like where is the line? If you cross it, can you come back from it? That kind of that is raised by the Jedi sequence and is followed through with the rest of the section. But we don't get any, like you said, intention behind that question being explored. There's no tying of that to his character journey. It's a side point, which is where then this falls. It feels like it's not part of his own personal journey. It feels like an aside, a mention of this is something that people should be aware of as they're reading it. And
Mhm.
you can't just do that. You need to have it tied to the character journey, tied to the side characters, personalities, tied to the meaning here of the story. And it just wasn't. It was out.
It's an unnecessary detour.
Yeah, and it's a
Like it
lot of
was
internal, like you say, man, going back and forth, back and
it
forth.
was
I'm thinking about
clumsy.
this, I'm thinking about that,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. He's doing a lot for this section of the book,
a
and
lot.
it kind of
I
just,
mean,
Yeah.
I mean a lot.
yeah,
I was listening to that on double speed, and I still felt like it was there for 20 minutes. You know what I mean?
mm,
Just of back and
Slowest
forth,
part
back
of
and
the
forth,
book.
back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what are you how stupid I mean, even if you're Star Wars, traditionally you think you're writing for, like, I don't know, like what, like 11 to like 16 maybe, like, in your head, just as a baseline.
yeah, it's family
Who are
genre.
you explaining in intricate detail, like why temptation's natural, but this is wrong for A, B, and C, and D, and just like having to explain, Mirax wasn't the first woman I was with, but things were different back then. And it was like,
It's just like, what?
Yeah.
I know, it's
who are you
ridiculous.
talking to?
And,
Like,
and also, and
this is so
also,
strange.
even putting
Not
aside the
cool.
skeeviness of it all and the fact that it isn't necessary and all of that stuff, it's undermining the tone of the core tension, of the central tension of the story.
Yeah,
Like,
the
he's
whole thing is
supposed
I'm
to
looking for
be
my wife.
about
Yeah,
saving his wife.
Exactly.
So why is
yeah.
temptation coming into it? You can do that again. That has its place in a story like this, but it has to be a much bigger piece. It has to be a much more heavily tied to the flaws and the struggle of the character. It has to be
Yeah.
have meaning behind it, and it's just a small piece of a small
Well, if he was
section that just overstays its welcome.
doing,
Bits like did that better. Like he does
yes,
tempt Corn with her or like all that. Like you had that. You don't
Mm.
need more of it. And
I
it was
think if
like you said, it was much more truncated and better presented.
given everything else presented in the story, if you had to have it, it might have been better. And because he's trying to like find his sense of self, even though he arrives at the other thing about the epiphanies he has about how he's going to live is that they don't really come at the exact end of the story. I mean,
Mm.
they do; they're reaffirmed there, but and they feel earned there. But because he reiterates to himself what he's gonna like, how he's gonna be from now on, and everything, to have them then suddenly questioned in this way, it's just the wrong format. Like it's the wrong
Mm.
layout for this particular kind of struggle. If you want to have this, you should be telling a slightly different story. And I think I probably would have done what I'm about to say anyway, where how about just Mirax is in the opening of the book
Yeah.
and then she goes missing at some point and he's very not aware that she's gone missing for like a long old time. You know what I mean? Like he might, maybe he's getting messages that are sent to him to convince him that all's well. And then he only then, which I thought was kind of the setup initially, like in the deep opening before he realizes what's really going on. But he then realizes belatedly she's gone. If you wanted to play with like a sense of despair of like, how do you even know she's alive? Then you can have this temptation thing where it's like more of a guilt, like I don't actually know that she's dead, but I don't have much reason to think that she's alive, and this woman's here. Like then you can kind of have these things, and if you wanted, just doing the deep undercover thing, it doesn't work here. It worked with
No.
like in Legacy with like Cade and Darth Talon because Cade's Cade and fucked up and crazy.
Right.
You aren't supposed to be getting moral
and
lessons from that character, particularly at that point in the story.
Right.
With Corran, who has just come off the back of like 10 different
Yeah.
tirades about moral character. It's like, oh my god. I've faced the dark, I've faced temptation, I've faced
This
seduction, I've faced all
story,
this stuff, and then immediately falls on
yeah,
this hurdle
Right.
as well. There's so many different problems here.
the author wanted this scene, the story didn't, and that it's
Mm.
just in conflict with the rest of it, you know. So
Right.
I think and it is skeevy, and I don't know why it's there. It's a big fat zero for
Yeah.
me,
Mm.
so I would have cut that out, but
Yeah.
or just
But
heavily
on a
advised against it.
It's also the whole point
Yeah.
of the character as well. This character
Yeah.
of I've forgotten her name. I keep calling it in
Vera?
videos. Her whole shtick is I seduce people and I have a bunch of spiritual lackeys that are making my strategies work. Like, that's
Yeah.
literally it. There's
She's
nothing to this
She's
character.
Diet Dala, which is
Yeah,
already
Diet
kind of
Darla. And how do you
That's an
dilute
insult and a
down
half.
Darla?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And particularly
Yeah.
because so much work was done to make the Invidious feel like a more unique and slightly aside threat. I mean, obviously they are an Imperial remnant, but they're Imperial remnant who are making their
Turned pirate.
yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
a twist on the idea, like you said, Matt, about the Academy one. You can have that Academy, that Imperial base, but just twist the idea a bit. And they did that, and they made them formidable, and they made them scary and not scary, but intimidating. The idea that this is something that the Republic, with all of its resources, is struggling with. You know, it's they sold the threat and the credibility of the faction, and then they completely just dropped the ball on the actual leader herself.
And you even see that sort of like threat, like, with Elagos and like what happened with him and how him and, Corran, form their friendship and the lengths that he goes to kind of, help him basically. And honestly, like Elagos is one of those characters I know like some people are kind of hit and miss about as well. A lot of people kind of view his sort of memory sort of shtick as kind of a bit of an ass pull to kind of help reveal the revelations of like what really went on with Halcyon. I don't really mind it because they make a point of addressing A, he can't do it instantly, and B, it's very much something that is intentionally baked into his species and their culture and their specific way of doing things. Plus, he could only have, share those memories in a specific way with another force user as well. So it's like they justify just enough. Sorry, I said justify twice. They do just enough to justify it where it doesn't really bother me, the lengths that he goes to and the formation of their friendship and why ultimately they come to the revelations they do. Just enough work is done to where it doesn't really bother me.
Yeah, it's like a trope, but they do the work to make use of it. I think
Yeah.
it's fair,
We also haven't talked about the building lightsaber scene. I think that's worth just kind of touching on a bit as well. This sort of just the idea of, well, I mean, for one thing, I like the fact that, again, building a lightsaber is not a simple task, as some mediums tend to portray it. I do appreciate that. The fact that it's very specifically a method that Halcyon developed for building one quickly in the heart of battle kind of makes sense retroactively, even if, the Clone Wars and what that really wasn't really fully discussed. It settles. The dual phase mechanism, I kind of like that as well. Nice little setup with, stuff from the Academy. Again, just kind of gives it its own unique sort of flair.
I love that was ego as well. I love that it was just ego. Well, Gantoris did it, so I'm going to do it too. That's just it was a nice little flourish of this guy, exactly what this guy is as a person.
I also just like, again, like he goes into that meditative state for, I think they say like 3 or 4 days. I do appreciate the fact where Elagos is like not as quick as your grandfather would have done it, but serviceable. Again, just little flares with that. Elagos has a lot of really great lines and is just Elagos way, so really do appreciate that. But what do you guys think?
I'm largely in the same camp. Although
Okay.
I pay attention less to things like lightsabers. I just I- I've always just kind of been more down with like the kind of the vibes of Star Wars. You know what I mean? I don't really get too invested in the mechanics of things
Mm,
like that. But having said that, I thought he wrote it without it feeling too bogged down and without it feeling inappropriate. Like I was
mm.
perfectly willing to take it as he presented it. It's just not my particular area of
That's
fascination.
fair.
Yeah, I'm more
Yeah.
alongside Matt when it comes to the vibe aspect of it. Like for me, it's the nitty gritty of all the details aren't as much of a big deal outside of selling the world and selling the story.
Hmm.
But with the exception of, well, not the exception of when it comes to lightsabers within that same space, I also like how they get tied to the kind of spirituality and personality of the characters. I think that I've always liked that kind of this is
Yeah.
my sword. There are many swords, but this one is mine. That vibe of selling that, particularly in the meditation of the creation of the things. And I think, like Matt said, he did a very good job of that. I think this feels like
Yeah.
a Corran Horn built on the fly lightsaber. I like that.
Yeah. It
And also, it's
it
important
reminded me
because
a
for
lot
people who
of
do like lightsabers, you got to sell the points. He's done that well here.
hmm it reminded me a lot of Shadows of the Empire when Luke builds his in
Mm,
Ben's hut. The
very
sort
much
of like
so.
the interconnecting, like not just the mechanical aspect, but just the spiritual aspect of it, the connections between him and the crystal and all that. It's all very nice. When he first turns it on, I mean, silver blade, pretty unique. For
Mm,
the time in particular, nice little visual cue, and then when he shifts it into the dual phase, becomes purple. Again, just kind of interesting visual representation, a good way of sort of differentiating Horn from, the other Jedi at the time. So again, just really well done.
I like the
I like to
choice
think
of
of fans at the time being like, "Oh, the showboaty bastard again!" Like,
yeah,
just everything's good with him. Just 'cause that's probably just more ammunition and like the,
yeah.
If
I,
only they
yeah,
if only they knew where things would go in the
I
future, they
know,
might
right?
not
Because
have
this
done anything
character
too
is
much.
like chef's kiss of a Jedi later on. Anyway, I like the choice of purple. Again, it's superfluous, really, but I like the choice of purple in the fact that it's a feature that he took from Gantoris, and so it's appropriate that the blade color would match Gantoris's blade. I think that's appropriate. As a solid choice there. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I liked it all. Is the
This
answer
kind of
to the
takes us
question.
into like his. I mean, again, we kind of already touched on the Batman sequences where he's going
Yeah,
around trying
he
to
does
scare the
just
invis, and
become
he's
Batman,
effective.
and Elagos is his
Yeah,
Alfred. I mean, it's just straight up that. But I don't know why. Again, as with everything, I
you're
didn't
saying that like it's a
dislike.
bad thing. I love it.
Well, yeah, I didn't dislike it, but this late in the
it's more like,
story,
why is it
and
here?
yeah,
Yeah, like
and
why is it
taking
here
yeah,
now?
exactly.
Yeah,
Like it's fine if you make the story about this, if you sell it as part of the larger narrative, if it's happening for a
comic book,
particular story
turn into a
reason.
comic book,
Yeah,
folks.
exactly,
Yeah, I
exactly.
guess
It
so.
works
Yeah,
better as a
I
comic
agree
run.
with you that it's silly,
Yeah,
but I think it's a lot of fun, and it is him
It
taking
is, it is,
agency as
and
a
it's
way of
done
finding
well.
Mirac.
It's done well. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Like the sequence is well handled. It's just I don't know why it's in this larger story. It's packaged wrong. It's placed wrong. All that kind of stuff. I know it feels like I'm nitpicking, but that is a huge part of the framing of the story and the purpose of the character journey and all that stuff. I would have liked
I don't think it's
this
a
in
nitpick.
a more
Yeah, just
significant
I'm with you on that.
role. Yeah.
I
I
I
mean, I
am with
wouldn't
you.
I wouldn't say it's unnecessary though, because by destabilizing the Invids, that he's able, that's what gets him into the door of ultimately being able to rescue her. So it does serve a purpose. He's not just dicking around.
No, for sure. No, it has purpose. It's just, and I like the fact that we're focusing on. I'm going to save my wife now. It's much appreciated for that. But it's just,
Yeah, yeah. After
it's
so long.
exactly after so long, and the fact that we spent so much time with the Invids before he even started doing this, because he's got to work his way up through the ranks of 3 separate squadrons to get here. And we've had the weirdness with the leader of the Invids, and it feels like this could have come 10 chapters earlier, maybe 5 chapters earlier, whatever,
Mhm.
and just taken less space and been the dominant aspect of the Invid sequence. Fold the two together and make this the larger piece of it. It took a while to get here, and it
Right.
wraps up very quickly. I mean, this could have been a montage. Wouldn't want it to have been, but in terms of what happens, it could have easily fit within the montage, and that shouldn't be true of the latter third of your entire story. In my
I
That's
opinion.
fair.
also feel like with it being called like I Jedi and like what his
Mm,
particular problems are, like the idea that it's not like the idea that he doesn't have like a extended segment of just being like alone and kind
yeah.
of like
What kind of
thinking
Jedi is he
about
going to be? How's he going to?
yeah.
Yeah. What kind of person he's going to
I
be?
just
It kind of talks about a lot, but what kind of Jedi he's going to be? This is the only sequence we really get for that, and I feel like that was a
yeah
bit of a dropping the ball.
It
yeah.
was
It's
well
just
done.
it's
We just wish there was more of it, and I
Mm,
am in agreement with you on that. But this kind of leads us into the final major section. We already mentioned the Gen Sarai being in this book, and obviously, Tavira uses them because they're her strongest force. So she's like, okay, if there's a Jedi down here, they can take care of him, and that's obviously where we get those sequences.
And then Luke
I
comes
mean,
out of nowhere. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. The second you hear that other person appear at the alley and draws a lightsaber, and I'll look at the green. Of course, it's Luke. The second he steps on the page, you know it's Luke. But why? Like, where does that fit narratively here?
Why? So they can have a scene at the end where they say, "I was wrong about everything." At the no, but you're the reason we won here. It's like that's why.
yeah,
Patting each other on the back
yeah,
and making
exactly.
friends again. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It's flawed in my opinion, quite heavily flawed. And the Jedi, they don't have relevance to the rest of the story. They're just to get they're basic. They may as well have been a MacGuffin if they'd been a small like a Sith holocron box that she'd smuggled from Exar Kun's temple that could hide force sensitivity on like a fleet level. They'd have served exactly the same purpose before the end when they give you a bit of personal character.
And the unidentified Sare Car, who we, like I said, we don't even get a name for her, despite her being so largely connected to Halcyon and that whole. Again, I like the themes that she represents, and I liked the actual sequence, the revelation sequence where we see the full story of what happened, between all these individuals. But she's introduced so late in the game. She has so little agency. She's barely even hinted to. I mean, she's literally like. She had a kid with what was his name? The Anzadi Jedi who killed.
Yeah.
It's not relevant.
they kept
Insert name here.
Oftentimes they just called him the Anzadi. So I was like, yeah, right, that guy. Yeah. Sorry.
I'm writing this more tightly woven in my head even as we speak. Like with the Mirax thing, like she could have been looking up. Like I talked before about how the fact that she could have been chasing up the smuggling ring that led her to the Invids and led her to the Jedi. She could have been looking up the history of the Halcyons. She could have been looking up for Jedi knowledge, for trying to convince her husband about the whole having a family thing. Mm-hmm. She could have stumbled into the Exar Kun stuff, followed the trail, got involved with Luke to kind of tie the Jedi in. Found the Jedi. The Jedi find out she's Halcyon, ties to the story. She could have been part of all of this, and this would have been all. If we'd been a detective breadcrumb story, they could have been brought in much earlier on. Like a single Jedi is found is at the scene of when he gets to the point where Mirax went missing or something. Like who are these people? Why should I care about them? What they're connected to the Invids? That helps explain why the Invids have been a problem. Okay, what's going on here? Stretch them out and have them be a larger part of the narrative. It all makes sense. But having it be the latter 10% of the story. And otherwise just justifying the Invids' capabilities the way they are, unwillingly as well, while also hating the people that they're helping hide the Invids from. So why are they unwilling? None of this is tying together as a cohesive story for me. It's just plot stuff that happens.
I appreciate what they represent, and I appreciate what they do to kind of help move parts of the story along, but we don't spend enough time with them to give them any sort of agency. Like the whole thing with Belagos and his uncle Kla and Nija and that whole. I like the actual sequences we get with them, like the dream sequence, which is then followed up by the memory sequence, connecting all the dots together, and Desert Wind, who's obviously Anakin Skywalker, but they never actually say it. Interesting sort of. There's a few questions that kind of arise with that, but we won't get it. If we ever review Jedi Trial, I'm sure we'll have a few things to say about that. But again, I like those sequences in a vacuum. But again, we don't spend enough time with these characters to set it all up, even though the theming is consistent, but the characters are not. You see what I'm kind of getting at with this?
Yeah, and the urgency and the presence of the theming isn't consistent. Even though the kind of beats it's reaching for are there throughout the story, they're too far apart. They're too detached from what's happening. We're not spending enough time with his many internal ruminations being tied to those themes as part of the question. It's just very disparate and disjointed. And again, like Matt said, ultimately it's a draft issue. It needed to all be woven together much more thoroughly from the start.
This is why much earlier when you opened up saying that like what really dragged the book down for you was the Jedi Academy sequence. I was like, that's when it's most on rails. Like as a plot, like just you know what I mean. Like that's. I agree with a lot of what you were saying there. Clearly, we've been over that. But like to me, it's just I like a lot of the ideas in like the latter half of this or the latter third of it. But to me, it's messy. Like it's just it. I'm very curious. Really, what I want to know is how was the book pitched and who said you have to incorporate these ideas, or who begged to incorporate ideas that didn't necessarily need to be here, because it as awkward as like his character is at the trial or at the academy. I was trying to say trilogy, where he's just calling Luke out all the time and saying, "Boo, get off the stage! You don't know what you're doing." Pretty much like
without being Kip level of crazy, yeah.
Without being Kip. The Kip literally comes in and says that, right? But this. those scenes flow like one from the next, and granted he was working from previous material with that, but like each scene is to do with what came before. This, it just feels like, okay, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then the story's got to end, right?
Yeah.
And the characters all have to get
And then we
together.
rescue
So
Mirax,
yeah,
and
yeah, it
yeah,
doesn't work. Like
That's it. That's the
Vera
end. Yeah.
Vera just
it
kind of
so
fucks
easily
off.
could.
Like it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
That
very
that was
strange.
yeah,
why the Academy section stood out to me so much, because that was what was so the more viscerally annoying me. Like I was okay, but this is just frustrating now. This is I was disappointed more immediately because the intro was so strong. It's doing a lot of annoyingly bad fan fiction stuff, which it shouldn't be doing if it's a professionally written story. It's doing a lot of insulting of Luke Skywalker, who this form of him should not be getting insulted like that. Especially if the whole point is that you didn't like how the Academy
I mean, not if you
did
just
that.
go into it with the Jedi Academy trilogy, though. If it's that,
Well,
then
yeah,
it
of
is
course,
actually
but you know, like we
grand.
said all that there, yeah.
Sadly, exactly. I
you know my
hate-
thoughts on all this part, but the rest of
Yeah.
it for me was just a kind of low tier average Star Wars story. The thing that raised it above that, because I completely agree, Matt, the messiness is the largest point of this on a structural level, but it didn't emotionally bother me. It was just like, you know, it's weak.
yeah.
But the thing
If
that
this was a
elevates
video
it,
game, also I would like it. If
yeah,
it was a
exactly.
video
Exactly.
game
This is
and
what I
it was,
said.
and it was
Comic,
like,
video
I would
game,
also like
everything.
that.
Yeah,
Interesting,
it's
yeah.
it's brilliant. But it's just as a book, it needs to be more tightly woven together around the central tension. It needs to be tightly woven together with joined up narrative beats and
Yeah,
woven with the
book is wrong
character arc.
format.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But the things it does well, it does very well. Great dialogue, great
Mhm.
character moments, really strong placement of moments within the world, like you said, Matt. The Mass Effect kind of RPG vibe, where you feel okay, I feel
yeah.
like I lived in space here with people who are interacting with me as they would. That obviously sounds very wishy-washy, and well, of course, it's doing that. Good writing does that, but that is
No,
not
no, it's
always
not.
true.
No, it
And
does
also,
not. Yeah.
even
That's
good
yeah.
stories can be lacking in that area. That sense of space,
Yeah.
that sense
And
of
that's
lived-in presence. You know, that is strong throughout this story. It's just when
yeah.
it taps me into that kind of preachy, disconnected quality that we've talked about, on and off. That's when it's weakest. It redraft, just redraft, do it again, but better. I think this would have been really, really,
Yeah.
really strong.
And
Possibly
Yeah,
top
literally,
five.
yeah, and that's what
just
and that's what puts it over above and beyond, for me, because like yes, structurally it is extremely flawed, but like what it gets right with the characters, what it gets right with the dialogue, what it gets right with the themes of family and legacy, personalization, self-actualization, all of that is just so well done. The characters, even at their worst, are always just leaping off the page at every turn. And there are a lot of books that I would say are structurally written better than this that don't do that. And that is why this is, to me, I can overlook those fairly glaring flaws to still find an incredible amount of enjoyment in this book. And again, I think you should go into this purely thinking it as a character piece, because that is where it shines brightest. As an actual held together narrative, it is good, but at the same time, that's where its flaws, shine brightest for me. But at the same time, those character beats with these characters and everything that it sets up with the character dynamics with Corran Horn and his interconnectivity with the rest of the cast is honestly just brilliant to me, and why I still love it to this day despite its flaws.
yeah.
Mm.
I think it needs more focus. I think it needs to be trimmed down in spots, and I just think it would have been much better either as a series of novelettes or as a comic book or as a video game with like it's
Mhm.
particularly the type of video game where you're playing like through action sequences and then you have like extensive cutscenes, like an on rail story that doesn't vary too much. It's a story that is it's just the story is pretty static, but at the same time, what sells it is just like the vibes of going through it and how the characters all mesh together, and just the visual nature and just kind of like aura that Star Wars has, because it gets the Star Wars feel correct. It's got like 5-star moments, but I called it like a 3-star book in a world where most people see it as either 5-star or 1-star. So it's like
Agreed.
this weird. It's this very weird thing. You know what I mean to me, where I have a very different relationship with it than I think the vast majority of people who read it. And I think it's flawed, but at the same time, I don't begrudge it any of its success because it is very still to this day like a lot of people really like it,
Mm.
and I understand that far better than I do with certain other books. Not to keep harping on the Jedi Academy trilogy, but I really didn't like that.
I,
So to me, I would always choose to reread this, over that.
Absolutely. I said it before. I think when you come to this story was kind of largely dictate how much you love it. I think a young person coming to the story with less experience can get a lot from it. I think this is really strong on that one. A lot of sense idea of identity and the character arc that Horn is going on is you can learn a lot from it. I think that's one of the things, big selling points for young readers in the Star Wars space. The question I want to follow up with what you said, Matt, though, is it worth the price of admission for reading the entirety of the Academy trilogy to get here? That's the question. Because that was why we read the Academy trilogy. I read that so I could get to here.
I'm gonna say,
is it worth it?
I'm gonna say you don't have to read any of this if you don't want to, but if you're gonna read the Academy trilogy, you have to commit to reading this too.
Yeah.
And there's no real reason of reading this without reading that, unfortunately, because it's
I
so
would
heavily.
say, I would say it is worth it, but
Yeah.
it's definitely it's a task. So
Yeah.
I will say that much.
That's where I sit. I sit jointly between the two of you. I think it is worth it, but it's a task. And like you said, Matt, you can't really read either of it or without the other. It's a lump package.
You just have to commit to a certain amount of just baggage with it. You know what I mean? It's like that. There's weirdness coming in with the good. There just is. It's not a universally just flatly good experience.
Exactly.
And I think I have to apologize to you for selling it that way when we first talked about it. But
I was so excited for this book, and then I had the audacity to read the intro and get even more excited about it. And then, oh god, honestly.
But the bits you loved, you did love. So there's that.
I did really love them, and there's a lot to love here, as we've talked about. But yeah, I think that's it for our analysis of I, Jedi. I've enjoyed talking about it. I enjoyed reading it. Looking forward to the next thing on our list. Can't recall what that is. It's been a while, but we've got a long list to get to.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I hope you guys have enjoyed. Let us know in the comments down below your own thoughts and feelings on Corran Horn and this story. Where you think you might have disagreed with us, where you agree with us, etc. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I am Callan, and I still don't have an outro.
This is Matt. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.
Evan over 95. We hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys later.
Goodbye.